Chapter 352. Looking at the old man, who was wearing a respectful expression and had carefully retracted his aura, fearing that it might cause a misunderstanding, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, you don't have to be so courteous. You are the owner of this city, and logically speaking, I should be the one paying you a visit." Then he pointed at the guest hall located at the north side of the courtyard, smiled and said, "Since fellow Taoist is here, please come in and have some tea." The manager of Garden Inn ran out happily, shouting and yelling at the waiter to fetch the best spring water on the mountaintop to serve tea to the guests. Meanwhile, the old man and two middle-aged men bowed respectfully at Wu Qi, then strode into the hall with a cautious and respectful expression, not daring to show any neglect. Xiong Wanling and the other four nascent divinity old demons were hiding in their own rooms, as they had no interest in dealing with a small fry of Jin Dan realm. Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo were curious. Without waiting for Wu Qi to greet them, they walked straight out and sat on the main seats in the hall. Especially Zhao Kuo. With a cheeky smile on his face, he crossed his legs and looked at the three men sitting next to him in a leisurely manner, his eyes narrowed into two fine lines. As the main seat in the hall was taken by Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo, Wu Qi had no choice but to sit on a large chair opposite the old man. After that, he nodded and said with a smile, "I am Taoist Bai, and these are my uncle masters, Taoist Yen and Taoist Jun. May I know your names, fellow Taoists?" Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo nodded and greeted Wu Qi. The old man and the two middle-aged men quickly rose to their feet, cupping their fists and bowing to them. Cautiously, they looked at Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo. Amidst the dark mist behind Wu Qi's back, the tiny flying sword was still darting back and forth like a thief, yet Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo did not show any unusual signs. Although they were Wu Qi's seniors, they did not show any unusual signs of Jin Dan realm. Clearly, they were all nascent soul cultivators. A trace of excitement could be seen on the old man's face as he respectfully introduced them to Wu Qi and his companions. The old man was the current clan leader of the Tian clan, Tianju. The two middle-aged men were his two sons, Tian He and Tian Dao. Wu Qi snickered at the side. This family deserved to be the masters of Tian City. Even their names were inseparable from the crops. After listening to Tianju's introduction, Wu Qi leaned forward slightly and said with a faint smile, "May I know what brings Patriarch Tian here?" Tianju rubbed his palms together. Cautiously, he gave Yan Qijuan a look, who sat there motionlessly and gave off the air of an emperor, and Zhao Kuo, who had his legs crossed and looked like a foppish young master. Laughing dryly, he said, "Junior." Wu Qi waved his hand and said with a smile, "Patriarch Tian, please don't keep calling me Junior. It sounds really uncomfortable." Hastily, Tianju corrected himself and said, I understand." Clearing his throat, Tianju smiled and said, "Just now, I heard from my clansmen that a few seniors have come to Tian City. Naturally, I would like to pay them a visit." May I know the purpose of your visit?" With a roll of his eyes, Wu Qi came up with a lie. He smiled and said, "Oh, we are from Thousand Waves planet. We are ordered to collect some rare spirit herbs and spirit herbs found in Shuiyuan planet. But we are unlucky this time, as we bumped into a few Heaven Immortal seniors, who made a big fuss and sealed off all the entrances and exits. Do we dare to argue with them? Therefore, we can only stay in Shuiyuan planet and see when we can go back." Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi shook his head, sighed, and said, "I heard that Snowflake City and White Frost City were destroyed by someone recently. We were staying in Snowdrift City, and we were wondering if those people were targeting the four largest cities in Shuiyuan planet. If that is the case, we can no longer stay in Snowdrift City. That's why we came to Tian City to lie low for a while." At this moment, Yan Qijuan chimed in, "Tian City does not attract any attention. I don't think anyone will come looking for trouble in Tian City." Tian City was the closest to Snowdrift City. Therefore, it was reasonable for Wu Qi to say that they were staying in Snowdrift City at the beginning. In order to avoid any danger in Snowdrift City that might endanger them, they decided to stay in a small, remote city. This was also a reasonable explanation. Wu Qi smiled and said, "We found Tianli City to be a beautiful place, and it has the taste of the countryside. Therefore, we decided to stay here for a few days. Once the commotion subsides and the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation can be used again, we will return to Thousand Waves Planet as soon as possible. Is there anything I can help you with, clan leader Tian?" Upon hearing that Wu Qi and his company were from Thousand Waves Planet, and they were ordered to collect spirit herbs in Shuiyuan Planet, the faces of Tianju and his family of 3 immediately bloomed with smiles. Tianju quickly smiled and said, "So, you are the seniors from Thousand Waves Planet. No wonder you have such a strong cultivation base. As a matter of fact, the reason why I pay you a visit this time is because I have something to ask of you. However, if my words have offended you in any way, please forgive me, forgive me." Wu Qi gave Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo a quick glance. Yan Qijuan said coolly, "Never mind, just say what you want to say. We are not unreasonable people. We are fellow heaven immortals, and we will be staying in Tianli City for some time in the near future. If there is anything we can help you with, we will be more than happy to do so. But it is better that this matter does not involve those few heaven immortals." Tianju was overjoyed. He and his 2 sons quickly rose to their feet, cupped their fists and bowed as they said, "We won't involve them, we won't involve them. This matter has absolutely nothing to do with those few heaven immortals. Seniors, if you don't mind, this is a dispute between us, Tianli City, and the Lin clan on the other side of the mountain ridge." Lin clan. Upon hearing the name, Yan Qijuan's face turned unsightly. Instinctively, he thought of the Lin clan in Snowflake City. For the sake of some upper-grade energy stones, Lin Qiulua, that crazy woman, had hunted Yan Qijuan down and nearly killed him. Even though Lin Qiulua, Lin clan, and even Immortal Chang Wu had suffered the cruelest revenge, Yan Qijuan still felt like he was holding back his anger. "Lin clan?" Wu Qi looked at Tianju thoughtfully, then asked in a neither heavy nor light tone. Tianju took a step forward, lowered his voice and said, "This Lin clan has nothing to do with the Lin clan in Snowflake City. But, as both clans share the same surname, this Lin clan has been trying to curry favor with the Lin clan in Snowflake City. Over the years, they have accumulated some friendship." Intentionally, Wu Qi tightened his face and said with a cold grin, "Lin clan in Snowflake City." Tianju's expression flickered, and he quickly said, "Senior, please listen to me. A few days ago, I received news that Snowflake City was destroyed, and all 3 major clans in the city were wiped out. Lin clan of Snowflake City is completely wiped out. Therefore, this Lin clan has lost its backer. If not for that, with the meager foundation of Tianli City, how could I dare to compete with them?" He exchanged a glance with Yan Qijuan, and the latter nodded slowly. Currently, he had a problem with the surname Lin clan, and whenever he heard it, he would feel uneasy. On top of that, this Lin clan was indeed related to the Lin clan in Snowflake City. Therefore, they should not blame him for being ruthless. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi crossed his legs as well. Coincidentally, the innkeepers served them some fragrant tea. After a short while, Wu Qi picked up the teacup and took a sip of the fragrant tea, then turned to Tianju and asked, "All right, there's no harm in me touching this Lin clan. I wonder what is the reason behind the dispute between clan leader Tian and them?" Tianju pondered for a brief moment, then stretched out 5 fingers toward Wu Qi and said, "If seniors can help me dispel the wild ambition of this Lin clan, I'll give you 50% of all the profits. What do you say?" Tianju looked nervously at Wu Qi, blinking his eyes. Instead of telling him what exactly the matter was, he first told Wu Qi the ratio of the profits. Wu Qi was immediately enlightened. He smiled and said, "So, the 2 clans have a dispute because they found a treasure? The treasure should be in this mountain, and it happens to be on the boundary line between the 2 clans' lands, right? Spirit herb? That doesn't look like it. Could it be an energy stone mine? A fire element energy stone mine? That doesn't look like it either. Could it be an ice element energy stone mine?" A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes as he stared at Tianju and his sons, whose faces had turned deathly pale. He smiled and said, This place is filled with underground fire, so it can only give birth to a fire element energy stone mine. But, if it is a fire element energy stone mine, with the characteristics of the cultivation technique you're cultivating, once you're stained with the aura of fire, your aura will definitely be impure. But now, the aura emanating from your bodies is as cold as before, without even the slightest impurity. Therefore, this is an ice element energy stone mine that is formed right next to underground fire and lava. Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo's eyes went wide at the same time as they stared at Wu Qi in astonishment. Judging from the panicked expression on the faces of Tianju and his sons, they immediately knew that Wu Qi was right. Lifting up the teacup and taking a sip, Wu Qi fiddled with the lid of the teacup and said smilingly, "An ice element energy stone mine that is formed right next to underground fire and lava. Rare, very rare. Since it has an opposing element of yin and yang, it must be accompanied by an extraordinary treasure." Coldly looking at Tianju, Tianhe, and Tiandao, who had returned to their seats, Wu Qi said in a cold voice, "Do the three of you really think that with the overall strength of Tian clan, they can keep an extraordinary treasure like this? Do you think they can enjoy all the benefits of an energy stone mine like this?" Beads of sweat rolled down Tianju's forehead like raindrops. Trembling, he stared at Wu Qi and stammered, "Li." Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "You should not have come to us. Since you've come to us, then Tanhe Tiandao, take my uncle master as your master. Give this energy stone mine to us, and we'll guarantee you a rich and prosperous future." With a slap on his forehead, Wu Qi's nascent soul flew out and hovered above Wu Qi's head, blinking its eyes as it stared at Tianju and his sons. Yan Qijuan was struck with terror. He sprung to his feet and cried out, "Little brat, when did you form your nascent soul? You! How old are you now?" Zhao Kuo was screaming in fear as well. He pointed his finger at the Jin Dan anomaly behind Wu Qi's back and screamed, "Your Jin Dan anomaly hasn't disappeared yet, and your nascent soul. Am I seeing a ghost?" Wu Qi laughed dryly. He kneaded the dark mist behind his back into a ball of dark pellet, then swallowed it. He laughed dryly and said, "I just formed this nascent soul by accident a couple of days ago. I have no idea how I did it. This Jin Dan anomaly is a good thing to fool people. You just haven't seen through my true cultivation base, have you?" As he laughed, dark mist burst out from all the pores on Wu Qi's body, forming a dark cloud behind his back. Within the cloud, 5 flying swords were seen flying and piercing in the air, looking rather shifty. With the nascent soul hovering above his head and the Jin Dan anomaly behind his back, both Yan Qijuan and Zhao Kuo groaned helplessly, then slumped back to their seats. Tianju's eyes darted back and forth. He was starting to regret coming to Wu Qi and his sons. If he had to give them too many benefits, his heart would ache. But, while he was still pondering, a ripple of nascent soul energy suddenly came down from the sky above Tianlu City. Following the ripple, an old, complacent voice of an old man rang out, "Old Tian, that treasured land belongs to Lin clan now." Rumble! A thunderbolt struck down from the sky, smashing viciously onto the ancestral mansion of Tian clan in the city. Chapter 353. The ancestral mansion of Tian clan in Tianlu City occupied nearly 1/4 of the city. It was built with green bricks and black tiles, and all the walls were painted snow white. The paint was made from a special product of Shui Yuan planet, a clay that was as fine as jade and translucent as crystal. After it solidified, it became as smooth as a mirror, glinting brilliantly. Under the reflection of the sun, it looked like a piece of white jade, delicate and exquisite, giving off an air of elegance unique to cultivators. With a casual strike from an early-stage nascent soul earth immortal hovering in midair, a mansion like this was struck down by a green thunderbolt. The roof tiles cracked, the walls collapsed, and many buildings in Tian clan's ancestral mansion collapsed one after another. More than half of the courtyard was smashed to smithereens by the thunderbolt. When Wu Qi and the others flew up into the sky and looked into the distance, they could still see countless severed limbs falling from the sky, their blood and flesh turning the sky red. Tianju was trembling with rage. Standing on the roof of Garden House, he stared blankly at the ancestral mansion that had turned into a historical site in just a blink of an eye. 2 lines of hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Wu Qi shook his head, sighed, and said, "Forget it. The people of Lin Clan are much faster than you. Hurry up and let your sons acknowledge us as their masters. We can help you avenge the annihilation of your clan. Your sons are still young and strong, and they can give birth to many more descendants in the future." Tianju turned to look at Wu Qi with a trembling body, then dragged his sons and cried incoherently, "Tianhe Tiandao, acknowledge us as your masters. Quick, acknowledge us as your masters. Oh heavens, how could this be?" The nascent soul Earth immortal off in the distance did not notice Wu Qi and his company. He laughed aloud, then waved his hand and unleashed another thunderbolt from the sky. A loud boom rang out, and a cloud of dust rose high into the sky. Amidst the thunderbolt, Tian Clan's ancestral mansion, along with a few other nearby mansions, were completely smashed to pieces. Not even a single beam or pillar remained intact. Laughing coldly, the nascent soul Earth immortal casually pointed out a sword beam and killed the dozens of servant girls and retainers who were crying and screaming as they fled from Tian Clan's ancestral mansion. Then, the sword light, which was less than 10 feet long and had a pale yellow color and was mixed with impure impurities, swept across the broken bricks and tiles of the Tian family's ancestral mansion, killing all the people who were still alive under the bricks and tiles. Tian He and Tian Dao dropped to their knees before Yan Qijuan and gave him a heavy kowtow. "Master!" Yan Qijuan smiled indifferently, waved his hand and said coolly, "Never mind, get up." In the future, Tian Clan might become the overlord of Shui Yuan planet. Who can say for sure? A cold gleam flickered in Yan Qijuan's eyes as he casually fished out 2 storage rings and threw them over to Tian He and Tian Dao. Tian He and Tian Dao took over the storage rings, and they were immediately struck dumb with fear. Storage rings were treasures that many Earth immortals in Liyuan Galaxy did not have. The Tian family had a few brocade storage pouches, which were considered as family heirlooms. As for storage rings, they had only heard about them in legends. Only half-immortals of the primordial soul realm and true heaven immortals were qualified to use such treasures. They tried to penetrate their divine senses into the ring, and sure enough, it was a storage ring. The enormous storage space inside made the 2 inexperienced cultivators feel dizzy, and they nearly fainted to the ground. They stared blankly at the energy stones piled up like a small hill inside the ring, as well as a few flying swords of upper-grade magical item level. They stammered and could not say a word for a long while. When Tianju saw the storage rings that Yan Qijuan threw over to his sons, his heart skipped a beat. They were rich. Tian Clan had found a great backer this time. Although he was just a wealthy man from the countryside, and his knowledge was rather shallow, Tianju knew very well that the power that could give a storage ring to the disciples he had just served must be a great power with a very strong background. Perhaps, only the core disciples from those immortal sects who stood at the very top of the minor heavenly circle realm could afford to spend so much money like this? With a thump, Tianju dropped to his knees before Wu Qi and said, "Senior, please uphold justice for all the members of Tian Clan." Although his sons had just acknowledged Yan Qijuan as their master, and although Wu Qi had told him that Yan Qijuan was his martial uncle, Tianju instinctively felt that among all the people present, Wu Qi was the most frightening and unpredictable one. Therefore, he dropped to his knees before Wu Qi, begging Wu Qi to uphold justice for him with a hoarse voice. Immediately, Tianju's cries alerted a few people hovering in the sky several miles away. The Earth Immortal turned around and looked in Tianju's direction with a surprised look. Standing right next to him was an old man with gray hair. Immediately, he pointed at Tianju and cried out, "Clan Leader Mo, he is Tianju. I only hope that Clan Leader Mo can help Lin Kexin kill Tianju and seize the foundation of Tian Clan. Then, Clan Leader Mo will take 80% of the benefits." Smiling, Wu Qi shook his head at Tianju and said, "Look, how generous is the clan leader of Lin Clan. He invited a foreign aide here, and without saying a word, he gave away 80% of the benefits. The greater the overall strength, the more benefits one can get. Tianju, just now, you said that you want to share the benefits with us. That's because we are kind people. If it were some other cultivators from the outside world, they would have slaughtered every single member of Tian clan and taken all the benefits for themselves. Tianju's face turned deathly pale, and cold sweat kept breaking out from all over his body. Trembling, he stared at Wu Qi and murmured, "Well, we have to talk about justice and credibility, don't we?" This time, Wu Qi did not laugh. Instead, Zhao Kuo and Yan Qijuan burst out laughing. Xiong Wanling and the few old demon kings, who had just come out to watch the show, were rocking back and forth with laughter. Supremacy 5 Mountains roared with laughter and said, "Justice and credibility? Bullshit. We always knew that the one with the biggest fist is the justice, and the one with the flying sword has credibility. Slaughter a city, and within 1,000 miles, there will be justice. Slaughter a country, and within 10,000 miles, there will be credibility." True Lord Windbreaking said in an indifferent tone, "Have you, Tian clan, become muddle-headed from farming? Have you eaten too many vegetables? Do you think a cultivator of Tao would talk about justice and credibility with you? What a load of bullshit. What a stinking bullshit. Even until today, your Tian clan is still alive." That makes sense. Who would come here and kill a clan of cultivators who only know how to farm for no reason? The faces of Tianju, Tianhe, and Tian Dao blushed. They bowed their heads shamefully, as if they felt that their behavior was indeed a little petty. Without sufficient overall strength and without finding out the background of Wu Qi and his companions, they foolishly came here and asked for an equal share of the benefits. Fortunately, Wu Qi and his companions were not evil cultivators from the Fiend League. Otherwise, before clan leader Mo could strike, Tian clan would have already been wiped out. Wu Qi and his companions were whispering to each other, and did not pay any attention to clan leader Lin Kexian and clan leader Mo relying on the fact that he was backed by an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Lin Kexian immediately flew over with a few of his clan members, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. They stopped at a place less than 500 feet away from Wu Qi and his companions. Lin Kexian, who had an eagle nose, deep eyes, and thin lips, looked like a short-lived ghost, pointed his finger at Tianju, who was kneeling on the roof, and said with a cold grin, "Old man Tian, you and I have been fighting against each other all our lives. This time, your Tian clan is destined to cease to exist. TSK, have you lost your mind or something? Are you going to kneel there and beg for mercy?" Wu Qi gave Lin Kexian a cold glance, who was acting all high and mighty, and pulled Tianju up from the ground. He smiled faintly and said, "Lin Kexian, I'm a fortune teller, and I've predicted that you will die today. Tell me, am I right or not?" Lin Kexian was taken aback. Pointing his finger at Wu Qi, he let out a long laugh and was about to break out into curses. But before he could say anything, Zhao Kuo suddenly teleported right in front of Lin Kexian, punched his Dan Tian, pulled out his Jin Dan, and crushed it to pieces. Lin Kexian's body suddenly expanded, then exploded into pieces amidst a dazzling white light. Vaguely, the crowd could hear the crazy battle cries of millions of soldiers, and in the next moment, Lin Kexian's soul was shattered into wisps of smoke. Zhao Kuo gave a cold snort. Suddenly, a white clump of battle aura burst out from his body, as blades, spears, swords, halberds, and all sorts of weapons shot out from it. The few clan members brought here by Lin Kexian did not even have the time to let out a miserable cry before they were shredded into meat paste by countless weapons. Far off in the distance, clan leader Mo, who was hovering motionlessly above the Tian clan's ancestral mansion, had his eyeballs nearly popped out from his eye sockets. He stared at Zhao Kuo, who suddenly teleported forward, and cried out in shock, "Teleportation divine ability? Senior, are you a half-immortal of nascent divinity realm? Senior, please forgive me. Please spare my life." Clan leader Mo could only let out a miserable howl, but Xiong Wanling had already teleported right next to him soundlessly. With a single slap of his 2 huge bare paws, clan leader Mo was crushed into a meat pie. Xiong Wanling licked the blood and flesh on his palms, then laughed and said, "I don't even know your name, and you're dead just like that." A mere early-stage nascent soul cultivator dares to act so arrogantly before me? Tianju, Tianhe, and Tiandao were trembling with fear. They turned to look at Wu Qi and the others standing next to them with terror. Nascent divinity cultivators. Even the patriarch of the strongest clan in Shuiyuan planet only possessed the cultivation base of nascent soul realm. Apart from the heaven immortals who supported those clans, no clan in Shuiyuan planet had such a supreme power. And this time, Tian clan actually had a group of nascent divinity half-immortals? Tianju was shocked, and at the same time, his heart was bursting with joy. According to Wu Qi, this group of nascent divinity cultivators were ordered to come to Shuiyuan planet to collect spirit herbs and spirit herbs. Who else could order a nascent divinity half-immortal? A heaven immortal. Only a heaven immortal could order a nascent divinity half-immortal. Tian clan was now rich, truly rich. What was the death of a few clansmen after attaching themselves to a heaven immortal? According to Wu Qi, Tianhe and Tiandao were still young, and they could still reproduce. Not to mention Tianhe and Tiandao, even Tianju himself was still young at heart. He felt that he could still contribute to the reproduction of his clan, and that he could still marry several dozens of wives and give birth to hundreds of children. For a moment, Tianju became extremely respectful. Carefully, he bowed at Wu Qi and the others and said, "Seniors, the land of treasures is located in the secret valley at the peak of Mount Tianlin. Please follow me there." But about Lin clan. Wu Qi pointed at Tianhe and Tiandao and said, "Tianhe, Tiandao, bring these two seniors to Lin clan and execute their entire clan." Then, Wu Qi assigned True Lord Windbreaking and Supremacy 5 Mountains to follow Tianhe and Tiandao. When Tianhe and Tiandao realized that they had a nascent divinity half-immortal as their backer, they were so overjoyed that they had long forgotten their own names. Happily, they brought the two nascent divinity cultivators with them. Riding on their flying swords, they flew across Mount Tianlin. On the other side of the mountain was Lin clan's territory. Next to the tallest peak of Mount Tianlin, next to a hot spring, was a pitch-dark cave, which was spraying out a threatening cold air. Wu Qi and the others were standing next to the cave, frowning as they stared at the entrance, which had just been opened. Chapter 354. Tianlin Mountain was named after the natural dividing line between Tian clan and Lin clan. The southern part of the mountain was the territory of Tian clan, while the northern part was the territory of Lin clan. The main peak of Tianlin Mountain was over 10,000 feet tall. Because of the many geothermal hot springs in the vicinity, the peak was covered with lush greenery, and there were quite a few fountains and waterfalls. It was a very beautiful scenery. Right on the west side of the main peak, in a valley that was over 10 miles long, over 30 hot springs had been gurgling out with hot water. The hot water had been flowing for years, nourishing a rich and fertile area of farmlands. A few days ago, a small-scale earthquake occurred in Tianlin Mountain. It was nothing serious, but a gap was opened up in a cliff in the valley, revealing a long and narrow cave entrance, about 70 to 80 feet tall. The cave was bitterly cold, with chilly winds constantly blowing out from it. The hot spring near the cave entrance had been frozen by a thick layer of white ice. Hot and cold water vapors clashed against each other, causing heavy snow to fall in the valley, making it look like the middle of winter. Wu Qi and the others stood at the entrance of the cave. True Lord Windbreaking and Supremacy 5 Mountains had already returned. It did not take them much effort to kill all the members of Lin clan. Under the guidance of Tianhe and Tiandao, without alerting anyone, it took them less than the time to finish a pot of tea to wipe out all the members of Lin clan. When they came back, Wu Qi and the others had not yet entered the cave. The cold wind blowing out from the cave contained an abundance of water elemental energies. The dense water elemental energies condensed into fist-sized energy balls in the air, invisible to the naked eye. These energy balls shot out at high speed and hit on the bodies and faces of Wu Qi and his company, causing them to feel a slight pain on their skin and flesh. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and the incorporeal chilly wind blowing out from the cave suddenly turned into a white mist that could be seen with naked eyes. The mist swirled and produced faint whistling noises, then drilled into Wu Qi's body through his pores. 10 innate Jin Dan quickly absorbed the natural energies. To Wu Qi's surprise, he found out that the quality of the natural energies in this place was extremely high, vaguely approaching the boundary between the Hotian and Xiantian realms. Anyone who could cultivate here would be able to increase their cultivation speed by more than 10 times. However, the natural energy here was pure water element, which was only suitable for the natives of Shui-Yuan planet who were cultivating with ice element cultivation technique. Tianju cautiously glanced at Wu Qi, who was shrouded in the white mist, and said in a low voice, "Seniors, this is the treasured land that our Tian clan and Lin clan are fighting for. We once went in to investigate, and discovered that the rocks inside were covered in thick ice. Countless ice-attributed spiritual stones were hidden in the rock stratum under the Xianbing. We've gone in for about 3 to 5 kilometers, and the number of spirit stones we've seen is in the hundreds of thousands." Wu Qi nodded and said in a low voice, "Let's go in and take a look." Although he said that he was going to have a look, Wu Qi first took out 36 pre-crafted formation discs from Black Dragon Spirit Ring, assembled them together, and embedded a large amount of energy stones into them. With that, he deployed a 3-in-1, tri-primary illusory moon-slaughtering formation outside the cave entrance, which was a combination of a maze formation, an illusory formation, and a killing formation. The speed at which he deployed the formation was very fast. In just 15 minutes, the entire valley was enveloped by the vast white mist that emanated from the formation. Yan Qijuan looked at Wu Qi with surprise, then nodded his head thoughtfully and said, "You've learned the Tao of formation from Heaven Breaking Sword sect as well?" Wu Qi nodded his head reservedly and did not say a word. Zhao Kuo was also looking at Wu Qi with great surprise, then he shook his head. Zhao Kuo had nothing else to say to this big brother of his. Even with Zhao Kuo's intelligence and quick-wittedness, he had only learned the Tao of formation for a short period of time, and then he resolutely gave up on studying it. Unless he was an extremely talented and intelligent man, there was no way he could have a profound attainment in the Tao of formation. When Zhao Kuo saw how Wu Qi constructed the formation so skillfully, and how he could not see through its mysteriousness, his slightly aggrieved heart gradually calmed down. "It doesn't matter if I admit that I've accepted Wu Qi as my big brother." Zhao Kuo told himself in his mind, "Be a good man. Since I've already been subdued, I should stop thinking about other things." Apparently, there are many benefits in following him. Xiong Wanling and the other 4 nascent divinity demon kings were trembling with fear. The formation constructed by Wu Qi was emanating an immense coldness. When they carefully examined it with their divine will, they found nothing. Even with their experience and knowledge, they could not tell how powerful this formation was. However, they had a vague feeling that if they were trapped in this formation, they would never be able to get out. The 3 demon kings who were forcibly subdued by Wu Qi bowed their heads respectfully. Just like Zhao Kuo, the last bit of resentment in their hearts had vanished. It was just a formation, but it had changed the minds of everyone present. Yan Qijuan even assumed the bearing of a master, lecturing Tian He and Tian Dao on the spot. "Learn this. No matter what you do, you must always leave a backup plan. Never act recklessly, and never place your own safety in someone else's hands. Only after constructing this formation can we go in and investigate with a peace of mind. Otherwise, if some enemies sneak in after us, won't they be a great threat to us?" Tianju and his sons nodded their heads as if they were suddenly enlightened. They kept bowing at Yan Qijuan, saying that they had learned a lot from Yan Qijuan. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Wu Qi took out a small teleportation formation disc and mounted a fist-sized spatial breaching spirit gold onto it. Looking at the dumbfounded crowd, he smiled and said, "Let's construct a teleportation formation disc first. I'll bring another one with me. Even if we run into some dangerous place, as long as the surrounding void is not sealed, we can always retreat safely." After placing the formation disc firmly behind a few rocks near the cave entrance, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Of course, I don't think our luck is that bad. There are not many restrictive spells in the world that can seal the void. Our luck can't be that bad." With both hands clasped behind his back, Yan Qijuan nodded with a smile. He was getting more and more satisfied with Wu Qi, his son-in-law. One could say that he was a coward, but it also proved that he was a cautious and prudent man, always leaving himself a way out and a backup plan. Therefore, Yan Qijuan felt at ease leaving Princess Zhonglu in his hands. When Wu Qi was done with all the preparations, the crowd entered the cave, which was filled with an eerie cold air. He Qianqiu, who had the fastest speed and the most nimble reflexes, walked at the front, while Wu Qi, surrounded by Xiong Wanling and Supremacy 5 Mountains, followed closely behind He Qianqiu. Yan Qijuan, Zhao Kuo, and Tianju and his sons walked in the middle of the group, while Green Shadow and True Lord Windbreaking brought up the rear vigilantly, ready to provide support at any time. As Tianju said, there was a very long tunnel inside the cave. It was over 100 feet tall and wide, and was covered with a 10 feet thick layer of xianbing. Under the transparent layer of xianbing, countless ice element energy stones were embedded in the thick rocks. Each of those energy stones was the size of a fist, and there were even some rare natural energy stones the size of a water tank. Judging from the quality of these energy stones, each of them was at least a middle-grade energy stone. The natural energy in the tunnel was shockingly strong. As the rich water element natural energy gathered together, the air was rippling with a faint blue gleam, making the group feel as if they were walking in water. The spirit stones in the surroundings emitted a faint glow, and the glow from countless spirit stones converged together, illuminating the passageway. At first glance, the tunnel was very long, extending downward at a 30-degree angle. No one knew where it led to. Wu Qi and his company moved forward at a fast pace. In just 15 minutes, they had traveled over 60 miles, but they still could not see the end of the tunnel. At this point of time, the density of natural energy in the air had reached an astonishing level. Walking in the tunnel, they felt as if they were walking in a sticky glue, as they could vaguely feel some resistance. The amount of energy stones under the xianbing had also increased, and they were getting bigger and bigger. It was as if those energy stones were squeezing against each other on the rocks, forming a tunnel entirely made of energy stones. Tianju and his sons stared blankly at the immeasurable amount of energy stones in front of them, following the group with stiff steps. Their eyes were wide open. Wu Qi smiled and said, "Look, what you found is a deadly tunnel. Even if the few strongest clans in Shui Yuan planet discovered this place, they are destined to have their families destroyed, and all their people killed, let alone Tian clan and Lin clan. Once those heaven immortals know that there is such a bizarre tunnel here, they will definitely not let you go so easily." All of a sudden, Wu Qi leaped out and dashed several hundred feet forward, stopping on a xianbing on the side of the road. Carefully, he dug out a clump of translucent, pale blue Ganoderma, which was emitting an elegant fragrance. The clump of Ganoderma was about the size of a human head, and was composed of 72 thumb-sized Ganoderma. They were stacked layer upon layer, and looked extremely adorable. Yan Qijuan and the others quickly came over as well, fixing their eyes at the clump of Ganoderma. Wu Qi took a careful sniff at the Ganoderma's aroma and gave it a good look. Then he nodded his head and said, "That's right, this is an 8-9 fragrant Ganoderma, a treasure that can enter the 6th tier among all immortal grade spirit herbs. It takes 10,000 years for one leaf to grow, and there are 72 leaves here. Obviously, it has lived for at least 720,000 years. After growing 72 leaves, it will no longer grow any new leaves." Turning the Ganoderma over, Wu Qi pointed at the rings of wrinkles under the pale blue leaves and said, "After growing 72 leaves for 720,000 years, one more ring of wrinkles will be added to the leaf after a period of growth. There are 98 folds here. That is to say, after this Ganoderma has grown all its leaves, it has grown for another 98 periods." Zhao Kuo stared blankly at the rare spirit herb, then asked in a daze, "What's the use of this? Can I directly ascend and become a heaven immortal after eating it?" Wu Qi put the fragrant Ganoderma into a cold jade box, shook his head and said with a sigh, "What's the use of this? It is a 6th tier immortal herb, and it is said that gold immortals can concoct pills with it. Anyone below the realm of gold immortal will die if they eat it. Do you want to give it a try? Wu Qi turned to look at Zhao Kuo, but the latter quickly shook his head. In Tranquil Vimla sect, there was a grading system for immortal herbs and immortal pills. 9th, 8th, and 7th tier immortal herbs were spirit herbs that heaven immortals could use, and could be used to concoct various pills without any harm. 6th, 5th, and 4th tier immortal herbs could only be consumed by gold immortals, while heaven immortals would die if they consumed them. 3rd, 2nd, and 1st tier immortal herbs could only be consumed by primordial immortals. Apart from some rare spirit roots of heaven and earth, which were spirit herbs that even mortals could consume, all the other immortal herbs were limited by their grade and overall strength. Everyone's mind began to race. They had just entered this place, and they had already discovered a fragrant Ganoderma of excellent quality. So, what would happen in front of them? Without needing Wu Qi to say anything, all of them stepped on their flying swords and carefully flew forward. Chapter 355. After flying along the tunnel for nearly 100 miles, Wu Qi suddenly saw a broken, pale purple flying sword lying on the ground, sealed by Xian Bing. Obviously, the quality of this flying sword was excellent. Although the 9-inch long flying sword had broken into 7 to 8 pieces, each of them was still emanating a faint immortal energy, and from time to time, wisps of cold air would burst out from them. Wu Qi even felt that the flying sword was breathing on its own. It was inhaling and exhaling the surrounding ice elemental spiritual qi, gradually healing its wounds. If given enough time, it could even use the enormous energy to heal itself, fusing the broken sword back together. According to the Scroll of Stealing, a flying sword that could heal itself was no longer a realm that a lower-grade immortal item could achieve. It was an immortal item that belonged to at least an 18th-tier heaven immortal. Without batting an eyelid, Wu Qi flew next to the immortal sword, opened up the Xian Bing, and picked up all 8 broken pieces of the immortal sword. The artifact spirit had already drifted away, and only the most basic divine sense brand was left behind. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi brought all the broken pieces to the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield in front of so many people. A clump of earthy yellow mist sprayed out from the shield, wrapping up all the broken pieces. Gradually, the broken pieces, which had lost the control of the item spirit, melted into tiny bits of purple liquid, fusing with the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield. The pale yellow shield was now covered with a layer of glistening, pale purple light, while countless needle-tip-sized purple dots could be seen blinking rapidly on its surface. A faint cold air was seeping out from the shield, while the ripple of divine will in the shield grew clearer and clearer. Hastily, Wu Qi sent a thread of his divine will into the shield. With a slight tremble, the shield gradually turned into a clump of yellowish liquid with a hint of pale purple, just like the immortal armor Wu Qi stripped off from Lin Qiuluo's body. Slowly, it fused with Wu Qi's skin, leaving behind a tiny dragon scale-shaped mark. Wu Qi smiled. The quality of this broken immortal sword was indeed extraordinary. Although the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield had only fused with a small part of its energy essence, it was able to push the shield to the grade of an immortal item. He wondered what it would look like after the shield completely digested the sword. The Earth Element Dragon Scale shield had gained too many benefits during the trip to Shui Yuan planet. The characteristic of the innate Earth Element energy essence that could contain anything had given it endless potential for evolution. All the others had seen what Wu Qi had done, but none of them said a word. Even Xiong Wanling and a few other old demon kings did not think there was anything good about this broken flying sword. In their minds, once a flying sword was broken, it would be completely destroyed and would no longer have any value. By fusing it with his defensive magical treasure, Wu Qi could at most add some raw materials to it. Apart from that, it served no other purpose. Sensing the faint ripple of divine will emanating from the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield, Wu Qi laughed joyfully and said, "Come, let's keep moving forward. I'd like to see what's so mysterious about this place." Hee, it was the fragrant Ganoderma just now, and now it's a broken immortal item flying sword. What's next? Dead immortals? Wu Qi's prediction came true. After traveling for less than 5 miles, A large, round hall with a diameter of over 10 miles appeared in front of them. Inside this hall, 3 corpses were seen lying on the ground, their bodies still emitting a faint gleam, their heads facing the tunnel where Wu Qi and company came from. There were wounds on their backs. Obviously, they were killed from behind when they were about to rush into the tunnel. Carefully, the company walked to the side of the 3 corpses. Wu Qi tore apart their torn robes, revealing the fatal wounds on their backs. The wounds were 3 inches wide, as thin as a piece of paper, and the flesh around the wounds had a blue hue, while the muscles had crystallized. Obviously, an immortal sword that contained an extremely cold and powerful force had ripped apart their bodies from behind, taking away all their life force in just a blink of an eye. Looking at the people surrounding him, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out the sword of Greedy Wolf. Holding the hilt of the sword, he gently made a cut on the back of one of the corpses along the wound. The sword of Greedy Wolf produced a large amount of sparks, but it only left a white mark on the corpse's body. It did not even leave a cut on his skin. Wu Qi nodded and said, "Corpses of immortals, they are indeed the corpses of immortals. TSK, they are the corpses of heaven immortals, and most likely, they are the corpses of some high-level heaven immortals. Therefore, unless it is a sharp weapon of immortal item grade, it is impossible to cut open their bodies." Zhao Kuo rolled his eyes and suddenly saw an exquisite blue ring worn on one of the corpse's fingers. However, before he could reach out his hand to grab it, Wu Qi had already snatched the ring away. Suddenly, a black dragon soul flew out from the black dragon spirit ring, opened its mouth and swallowed the ring. The black dragon's soul let out a satisfied burp, and the blue ring disappeared without a trace in his translucent body. Zhao Kuo was struck dumb. He stared at Wu Qi in astonishment and asked, "Why are all these things you have so strange and bizarre?" Wu Qi laughed dryly and did not say anything. He gave it a brief thought, and realized that all these treasures he had were indeed strange and bizarre. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield could devour immortal items to improve its power. The Sword of Greedy Wolf could even devour cultivators' nascent divinity and nascent soul. The Cold Electric Mirror could devour the essence of immortal items of the same element. And as for the 18 Celestial Fiend puppets, they basically did not reject anything. As long as they were materials that contained natural energy, they would be delighted. Shaking his head, Wu Qi removed the storage rings from the fingers of the other 2 corpses and fed them to the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. After that, he waved his hand and said coolly, "In these 3 rings, there are 13 broken immortal items, 2 in perfect condition, and 32 bottles of immortal pills. But all of them have turned into ashes. Apart from that, there are also some energy stones and immortal talismans. The immortal pills are useless now, and nobody cares about energy stones and immortal talismans. All the broken immortal items are mine. As for the immortal items in perfect condition, we can keep them and distribute them after we leave this place. What do you say?" Although the Black Dragon Spirit Ring had devoured the 3 storage rings, all the miscellaneous items in them had been transferred to the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. With just a quick scan with his divine will, Wu Qi knew what was in the 3 rings. Upon hearing what he said, no one dared to say anything, and just followed his suggestion. No one dared to go against Wu Qi's suggestion, as they either owed Wu Qi a huge favor, or their lives were in Wu Qi's hands. Therefore, whatever he said would be the law. After searching the 3 corpses and finding nothing valuable, Wu Qi casually waved his hand and shoved the 3 heaven immortal corpses into the spirit breeding ring. Although they had been dead for many years, and their immortal souls had long dissipated, their fleshly bodies were very strong. Using the divine flame of order, Wu Qi could still extract some blood crystals that contained powerful essence of blood and energy, immortal energy, and dharma energy. It was the same as recycling waste, and Wu Qi would never waste them. After cleaning up the 3 corpses, only then did Wu Qi and his company pay attention to the hall around them. It was a hall that was obviously made by man, fitting the saying that the sky was round and the earth was square. All 4 walls were made of ice element energy stones, and some strange patterns of flowers, birds, insects, and fishes were engraved on them. Originally, the hall was protected by a great number of immortal restrictive spells. But, judging from the dilapidated state of the hall, it was obvious that these restrictive spells had been destroyed by someone with brute force many years ago. Right in the center of the hall was a hole with a diameter of 1,000 feet, leading straight down. Water vapor was rising from the hole, and a very strong natural energy towered high up into the sky. Initially, 1,280 blue pearls, each the size of a fist, were embedded on the ground near the hole. But now, all the pearls were broken, and the one closest to the outer ring had even crumbled into fine powder. There should be some powerful defensive spells in this place as well, but apparently all of them had been destroyed by someone with brute force. Wu Qi nodded and said, "Come, let's go down and have a look. Perhaps we'll find some other surprises." Apparently, someone had cleared a path for us a long time ago. If we keep going like this, we'll be safe. Although he said that, Wu Qi still called out to Zhao Kuo, asking him to sprinkle out a handful of silver beans and summon a group of over 100 armored soldiers, who stood about 10 feet tall, to lead the way. The company followed behind these armored soldiers, carefully treading on clouds and flying down. The tunnel was about 1,000 miles deep, and the deeper they went, the colder the air became. Tianju and his sons were shivering, unable to withstand the cold air around them. It looked like they were about to be frozen into ice cubes. When Wu Qi saw that they could not defend against the cold breeze that was attacking them from all directions, he simply waved his hand, unleashing a beam of white light that pulled them into the spirit-breeding ring, and threw them together with the 3 immortal corpses. After descending rapidly for over 1,000 miles, the bottom suddenly became clear, and a pool of clean water suddenly appeared before their eyes. Obviously, this was an underground world created by some immortal with a mighty divine ability. It measured 1,000 miles in circumference and was about 100 miles high. Above their heads, the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars could be seen flashing on the rock walls. It was also the work of an immortal's magical power. The vast underground world was actually a pool of green water that was as calm as a mirror. When their divine will swept across the clear water, they found that it was about 10 miles deep. Countless huge, pale golden leaves that looked like lotus leaves were spread out on the surface of the water, connected by golden roots. Underneath those thick roots were countless tiny aerial roots that were as thin as human hair. These white and slender aerial roots were swaying in the water like countless strands of hair. Some of them were several miles long, and at their ends were countless fist-sized fruits that looked like pomegranates, sparkling and translucent like gems. In the center of this pool, right below Wu Qi and his companions, a thin leaf carved from green jade was spread out on the surface of the water, and an exquisite pale purple palace stood firmly between the leaf. The palace only had 3 entrances, with side palaces and gardens on the left and right sides. On the roof of the tallest palace in the center stood an exquisitely made bottle, about 30 feet tall, from which a strong water elemental energy was constantly bursting out. Just as Wu Qi and his companions descended from the passage, a great force suddenly came assaulting them out of nowhere. The force was so strong that it was shocking. Wu Qi and his company did not have the time to react, and neither did they have any power to resist. Their vision blurred, and their bodies were suddenly weighed down. When they regained their senses, they found themselves in a tall and spacious palatial hall made of light purple. On the jade platform in the center of the palace, a stunningly beautiful woman, clad in a pale purple robe, was lightly hovering above a pale purple lotus. Wu Qi and his companions only glanced at the woman. She gave a slight snort, and an enormous pressure came crashing down from above, forcing Wu Qi and his companions to kneel heavily on the ground. Amidst a muffled thud, the skin and flesh of Wu Qi and his companions' knees were broken, and large amounts of blood splashed out. Wu Qi was in so much pain that his vision turned black. His head was so dizzy that he didn't know whether he was dead or alive. Lady Dark Goldwater breathed out a faint sigh. A cold gleam flickered in her eyes as she sneered and said, "Too bad, as long as my enemy is still alive, how can I bear to die without avenging myself?" She looked at Wu Qi with great interest, nodded her head, smiled and said, "Good lad, you're just a nascent soul cultivator, But how can you have so many good things? Could it be that the outside world has changed, and the world is now filled with all kinds of natural treasures? Not allowing Wu Qi to refute, she pulled Wu Qi up from the ground with a great force and brought him straight onto the jade platform. Suddenly, Wu Qi recalled the last part of the scroll of stealing. It was the strictest warning given by the shadowy figure to Wu Qi, who had inherited the scroll of stealing. In the entire universe, there are countless almighty experts, and no one knows how many extraordinary people there are in this universe. The scroll of stealing was a great magic, a great divine ability, but was it the number one divine ability under the heaven? The figure of the peerless beauty in the purple robe was hazy, like the reflection of the water, flickering from time to time, creating ripples. While Wu Qi was sizing her up, 7 clumps of dark smoke suddenly sprayed out from her chest. Together with ear-splitting whistling noises, the smoke transformed into countless tiny fiends, scratching and scratching at her body. The lady's body was trembling, as a large amount of purple mist sprayed out from the purple lotus underneath her and fused into her body. With great effort, her body, which had become thinner and thinner after being attacked by those tiny fiends, finally managed to maintain its integrity. 6th Tier Gold Immortal. The jade platform measured several tens of feet in circumference and stood about 100 feet tall. It was covered with a thin layer of shell, and the inside seemed to be filled with emerald green jade paste and chalcedony. A lotus root was soaked in the jade platform, while a stem stretched out from it, holding up a purple lotus the size of a basin. A thin layer of purple mist sprayed out from the lotus, wrapping around the lady's body. Coughing out a mouthful of blood, Wu Qi raised his head in a daze, staring blankly at the lady standing on the jade platform several hundred feet away from him. The frightening cold air was something that Wu Qi had never encountered before. Even the divine flame of order seemed to be slightly inferior in front of the cold energy. 36 tiers of heaven immortal, 18 tiers of gold immortal. Even among gold immortals, a 6th tier gold immortal was considered as a superior existence. According to the introduction of the tiers of immortals found in White Cloud Immortal Sect's Scripture Pavilion, a 6th tier gold immortal was a formidable figure who could found his own sect, occupy several dozens of heavenly realms, and dominate an entire region. Motherfucker! Wu Qi cursed angrily. This lady was extremely rude and unreasonable. Even if Wu Qi and his companions had intruded into this place without permission, how could she humiliate them without saying a word? Flustered and exasperated, Wu Qi could not care less about that. With a shake of his left hand, the spirit-restricting rope shot out a long purple beam that stretched over 1,000 feet long, illuminating the entire hall and making everyone's hair turn purple. Clang, 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 clang. Wu Qi knocked his head on the ground 9 times, nearly breaking his head. Wu Qi was taken aback. He pointed his finger out, and the sword of Greedy Wolf transformed into a dark beam and shot out. 14 wolf heads wheeled and danced in the air, letting out sharp and unpleasant howls. However, just like the spirit-restricting rope, before the sword of Greedy Wolf could touch the lady, she lightly pointed her finger at it, and the sword fell into her hand with a reluctant howl. With a wave of her hand, the clone Wu Qi left in the sword of Greedy Wolf was erased once again, and he coughed out another mouthful of blood. Gingerly, Wu Qi looked at Lady Dark Goldwater, laughed dryly and said, "May I ask, how did you end up in such a situation? Not only are you left with a broken soul, you are also possessed by a vicious restrictive spell, and suffer the pain of fiends refining your soul day and night. Even though you managed to survive with the purple field spirit-nourishing mist, produced by the purple lotus, I'm afraid you won't be able to last much longer. Why don't you escape quickly and be reincarnated?" According to the records in White Cloud Immortal Sect, the immortal monarch who governed the entire minor heavenly circle realm where Wu Qi and his companions lived was just an ordinary 34th tier heaven immortal. Before a 6th tier gold immortal, a 34th tier heaven immortal was not even an ant, not even qualified to be called a speck of dust. The difference between a gold immortal and a heaven immortal was like the difference between a heaven immortal and a criminal. They were two completely different living beings. The lady's expression flickered, and she murmured under her breath, "Innate earth element energy? This fellow has such a strong cultivation base, he is really lucky. Laughing coldly, the lady shook her head and said disdainfully, "Do you think you can defeat me with just a lower-grade immortal item?" The lady narrowed her eyes and gave Wu Qi an appraising look. After a full 15 minutes, she said coolly, "I'm Lady Dark Goldwater, and my master is." She pondered for a brief moment, then shook her head, sighed and said, "Well, since I've fallen into this situation, it's not good for me to mention my master, lest I bring disgrace to your master's reputation. When I was at my peak, before my immortal body was destroyed, I was a 6th-tier gold immortal. This heavenly water-dark palace is a temporary palace I built when I was traveling around the world." Bastard! Wu Qi was so angry that he rolled his eyes. Ignoring everything, he waved his hand and unleashed countless dragon-scaled golden beams from his left hand, piercing straight towards the lady's body amidst ear-splitting whistling noises. The lady smiled faintly and pointed her finger out, trying to subdue all the dragon-scaled golden beams. However, the tiny bit of innate earth element energy essence attached to the earth element dragon scale shield could not be controlled by her. The golden beams continued to fly forward with shrill whistling noises, and were about to hit her. 6th-tier gold immortal. Wu Qi's eyes suddenly shone brightly. No wonder this lady possessed such a frightening overall strength, no wonder she had such an unimaginable ability, and no wonder she could easily toy with Wu Qi and the others in the palm of her hand. No wonder even Wu Qi thought she was just a broken soul, and even the core of her immortal soul had been shattered. She was just a broken soul, yet she still possessed such a frightening power. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, the fiends, which seemed to have grown a little stronger, transformed back into dark smoke and rushed back into the lady's body. The lady breathed out a heavy sigh. Her body tilted slightly, but very quickly, she stuck out her chest and hovered above the purple lotus flower. However, before the usually successful spirit-restricting rope could get close to her, she pointed her finger at it. Immediately, it transformed into a purple rope and fell into her hand, as if a young daughter-in-law had bumped into an evil mother-in-law. The lady gazed coldly at Wu Qi, then casually shook the spirit-restricting rope. Wu Qi felt a severe pain coming from his nascent divinity, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. The thread of his divinity he left in the spirit-restricting rope was turned into nothingness by an extremely frightening cold air. Lady Dark Goldwater remained silent for a moment, then said slowly, "Therefore I want to take in a disciple, and let him avenge me. It is only right and proper for a disciple to avenge his master, and they won't laugh at me. Don't blame me for using a heavy method to capture all of you. If I don't subdue all of you, how would you know about my unfathomable immortal techniques and divine abilities?" Lady Dark Goldwater put away the crystal wall with a puzzled look, then looked coldly at Wu Qi, nodded and said, "I didn't expect a little boy like you to have such knowledge. I am indeed just a broken soul now, and even the core of my immortal soul has been shattered. If I hadn't luckily found a purple soul heaven lotus seed when I was young, perhaps my soul would have long perished and vanished." From afar, Lady Dark Goldwater thrust her palm out, causing Zhao Kuo to howl miserably and fly several hundred feet up into the air. Grinning coldly, Lady Dark Goldwater said, "Ignorant little boy, what do you know? Even if I have to perish and vanish my soul, I still have to protect my face." Right when Wu Qi and the others were smiling bitterly, a faint white gleam shone from Lady Dark Goldwater's eyes as she gave Wu Qi and the others a glance. Suddenly, she waved her hand at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "Young lad, you possess a magical item formed from innate earth element energies. You have a pretty good fortune, and you have a promising future. Are you willing to acknowledge me as your master?" Wu Qi and the others were struck dumb. So, this shameless Lady Dark Goldwater attacked them because of this? "Why didn't you contact your master and ask for help?" asked Wu Qi in a deep voice. There was no reason for him to suffer like this. Lady Dark Goldwater rolled her eyes and cried out sternly, "How could I let my master know about such an embarrassing thing? If they knew about this, how could I face anyone again? How could I survive?" Wu Qi took a deep breath and briefly sensed the surrounding space. The space was very stable and had been sealed by a great force. Even though Wu Qi had burned his own nascent divinity and risked his life to launch a desperate attack, his blood escape art could not break through the force that had sealed the space. The force was too strong, so strong that it surpassed the limit that Wu Qi could understand with his current cultivation base. Therefore, there was no way he could escape. Chapter 357. 9 loud kowtows nearly knocked Wu Qi unconscious. With great difficulty, he raised his head and stared at Lady Dark Goldwater, his eyes filled with anger and shame. Lady Dark Goldwater lowered her head and looked at Wu Qi, who was lying motionless on the ground. Then she lightly waved her right hand at Yan Qijuan and the others, who were lying in the hall. Immediately, all of them rolled their eyes and fainted. A white water wave rolled out from where they stood, wrapping around the group and spinning them. Gradually, the water wave disappeared, and Yan Qijuan and the others were transported to somewhere unknown. Lady Dark Goldwater said coldly, "These people are a hindrance. I'll let them have a good soak in the heavenly true water down there." Heavenly true water? Wu Qi shook his buzzing head and smiled wryly. This was a good thing, absolutely a good thing. For those body cultivators of heaven immortal realm, the heavenly true water was the best material to strengthen their fleshly bodies and temper their immortal bodies. But this material was too good, so good that apart from heaven immortals, no one could enjoy it. Although Yan Qijuan and the others would definitely benefit from their fleshly bodies after being soaked in it, the pain they would suffer would be no different from being cut into pieces by 1,000 blades and having their hearts burned by a fiend flame. This lady was too cruel. Wisely, Wu Qi kept his mouth shut, not daring to say anything. Lady Dark Goldwater stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while, then said coldly, "It has been so many years, and you are the first group of cultivators who intruded into my palace. Among all these people, you are the only one who dared to attack me. You are a brave one, and since you have an innate earth element treasure with you, you must be very lucky. With your mortal body, you actually managed to cultivate the dragon transformation scripture? You seem to have a wide network of people." Wu Qi touched the black dragon spirit ring. A faint dragon roar rang out, as the black dragon's soul carefully poked its head out and nodded at Lady Dark Goldwater in a low voice. Lady Dark Goldwater gave the black dragon spirit ring a surprised look, then sneered and said, "A heavenly dragon is actually refined into a storage ring? If word of this reaches the ears of the few grand elders of the dragons, no wonder you can learn the orthodox dragon transformation script." After pondering for a brief moment, Lady Dark Goldwater looked at Wu Qi and said, "You've acknowledged me as your master. Therefore, you have to avenge my enemy." Wu Qi looked at Lady Dark Goldwater pitifully. He really didn't want to have a master like her. But now, he was like a fish on the chopping block. No matter how much he disliked this master, he could only reluctantly lower his head and respectfully say, "Of course. It is only right and proper for a disciple to avenge his master." Lady Dark Goldwater nodded slowly and warned, "In the future, if you kill my enemy, don't let anyone know about this. Master's illustrious reputation cannot be destroyed in a day. I'd rather let all the powerful beings in the universe mistakenly believe that I died in an accident than let others know that I was schemed against and ended up in this state. Can you do it?" Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "Of course I can. Protecting Master's reputation is also a disciple's responsibility." Wu Qi would never tell the world that he was Lady Dark Goldwater's disciple, unless he was out of his mind. Lady Dark Goldwater was a mighty 6th-tier gold immortal, yet she had ended up in this state. It was not hard to imagine what level of existence her enemy was. Even if Wu Qi could avenge Lady Dark Goldwater in the future, he couldn't let anyone know that he was her disciple. Who didn't have a few friends? Who didn't have an old friend? Naturally, those who befriended a gold immortal were also gold immortals. Perhaps, someone would know about Lady Dark Goldwater. If Wu Qi announced that he was Lady Dark Goldwater's disciple after killing her enemy, wouldn't he be intentionally provoking those who knew about him to come and seek revenge? Lady Dark Goldwater nodded satisfactorily at Wu Qi's straightforward answer. With a frown on her face, She began to slowly tell him how she ended up in this state. According to Lady Dark Goldwater, her master was an amazing man, a man who truly possessed an almighty divine ability. And Lady Dark Goldwater was the disciple whom her master was most proud of. In just 10 periods, she had cultivated herself into a gold immortal from a mortal. Patriarch Jiang Yun had been cultivating painstakingly for 100,000 years, and was still trying to break through the bottleneck of 35th tier heaven immortal. On the other hand, Lady Dark Goldwater had only spent 10 periods and 1,200,000 years to break through the realm of gold immortal. She could be considered as one of the top geniuses in the entire universe. Lady Dark Goldwater met her master when she was 12 years old. After that, she cultivated painstakingly for 10 periods and became a gold immortal. After cultivating painstakingly for another half an eon, she became a 6th tier gold immortal. The speed she achieved made many people jealous, but it also scared them to death. Lady Dark Goldwater kept talking about all the things related to her, while Wu Qi was analyzing her facial expressions and the tone of her voice, as well as the descriptions she gave. She was a genius who cultivated wholeheartedly, to the point that she nearly became stupid. She was a top genius in the path of cultivation, but when it came to the ways of the world, she was a complete idiot. According to her own words, in the long life that lasted for over half an eon, apart from her master, she had never spent more than half a year with other living beings. She was 12 years old when she joined the sect, and when she became a 6th tier gold immortal, her mental age was only 14 or 15 years old, and definitely not older than 16 years old. She was a 6th tier gold immortal with a mental age of 16 years old, and came from a very powerful sect. She was pampered and spoiled since she was young, and no one had ever disobeyed her will. Because of this, Lady Dark Goldwater had developed an eccentric, crafty, and unreasonable personality. Therefore, when Wu Qi approached Lady Dark Goldwater's temporary imperial residence and entered the sensing range of her broken soul, Lady Dark Goldwater, who had been holding herself back in the palace for a long time and was about to go crazy, immediately teleported them into the palace and began to torture them with violence. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi murmured under his breath, "Master, how did you get trapped in here?" Lady Dark Goldwater went blank for a moment, then frowned. After stepping into the realm of 6th tier gold immortal, no matter how hard Lady Dark Goldwater worked, she could not make any progress in her cultivation. The worldly affairs and the ways of the world were also one of the heavenly Daos. It was true that by cultivating behind closed doors, Lady Dark Goldwater could become a 6th tier gold immortal, but it would not allow her to make any progress in her cultivation. Therefore, under the instruction of her master, Lady Dark Goldwater left her home, traveled the world, and made a name for herself. Wu Qi gave her a few suggestions, and following Wu Qi's suggestion, Lady Dark Goldwater told him about the few things she was proud of in the past, which made her famous in the entire universe. They were none other than the deeds of upholding justice for the weak and upholding justice for others. And the only way Lady Dark Goldwater dealt with these things was to kill the entire clan of those who she thought were wrong and deserved to die, leaving no survivors. During the 3,000 years that Lady Dark Goldwater traveled the world, she had done more than 1,000 evil deeds. Because of the entanglement of grudges and the desire for revenge, a few gold immortals came to Lady Dark Goldwater for the sake of their disciples and clansmen. In the end, they were all killed by Lady Dark Goldwater. After that, she even went to their master's sect and killed every single one of them, regardless of whether they were good or bad, Wu Qi swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater, who had her eyebrows dancing up and down as she talked. He had no words to say anymore. Perhaps it was because of several tens of thousands of years of loneliness that Lady Dark Goldwater had developed the habit of being a chatterbox. Her rambling went on for a full 24 hours. After that, Wu Qi saw 7 wisps of dark smoke rush out from Lady Dark Goldwater's chest, transforming into countless tiny fiends, pulling and biting at her broken soul. Lady Dark Goldwater trembled from head to toe in pain, and her broken soul was flickering. Just like yesterday, by relying on the purple field spirit-nourishing mist to replenish the consumption of her broken soul, Lady Dark Goldwater barely managed to fend off the invasion of those fiends. However, it seemed like her broken soul had grown weaker again, and was showing signs that it could not hold on any longer. Lady Dark Goldwater laughed dryly, stared at Wu Qi and said, "Look, this broken soul of mine is getting weaker and weaker over the years. I can't hold on any longer." After a brief moment of pondering, Lady Dark Goldwater shook her head and said, "Now, listen carefully. The one who schemed against me is the grandson of the sect leader of Green City Sect, Reverend Li Yang. The one who schemed against me together with him is Fairy Xian Dai, whom I considered a good friend. Throughout all these years, I only have one good friend, and that is Fairy Xian Dai. I never expected that she would put Xiang Lu's saliva in my tea, and then attack me together." Wu Qi stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater. Fairy Xian Dai? He was not interested. Reverend Li Yang? He was not interested either. But Green City Sect. If I may ask, what is the background of this Green City Sect, Master? Wu Qi asked in a deep voice. Lady Dark Goldwater frowned. Tilting her head to one side, she pondered for a while, then shook her head and said, "Over the years, I've been harassed by those fiends, and some of my memories have become blurry. The Qingqing sect should be a sect formed by the immortals who ascended from the Qingqing mountain on that planet, which was left behind by an ancient immortal in the human world." After a brief moment of silence, a bright gleam flashed across Lady Dark Goldwater's eyes. Currently, Green City Mountain is one of the strongest sects in Xianyang Heaven Realm. Their sect leader is a third-tier gold immortal. Reverend Li Yang is his grandson, and his cultivation base is the same as Fairy Xian Dai's, a seventh-tier gold immortal. A sect formed by immortals who ascended from Green City Mountain? A sect formed by immortals who ascended from Green City Mountain? Suddenly, the bloody faces of Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and many brothers of Greedy Wolf Group appeared before Wu Qi's eyes. He nodded lightly and said, "Is that Green City sect from Green City Mountain? Reverend Li Yang? Fine, I'll kill him, and then I'll completely destroy Green City sect." Clenching his fists tightly and producing cracking noises from his joints, Wu Qi said softly, "I'll completely destroy Green City. I can't find my way back now, so before I go and wipe out their descendants, I'll kill all their ancestral masters in Xianyang Heaven Realm." Lady Dark Goldwater clapped her hands lightly and said with a smile, "Good. You must have this confidence. If you can wipe out Green City Mountain, I'll allow you to find your ancestral master and tell her what happened to me. If I don't wipe out Green City Mountain, I can't bring myself to let anyone know that I've fallen to such a state." Lady Dark Goldwater sighed lightly, shook her head and said, "I had such a mighty reputation in the past, but now, I've fallen to such a state. I can't afford to lose this face." She breathed out a long sigh, then turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Are you ready? I'm going to officially take you as my disciple. I'll leave the great responsibility of avenging me to you." Wu Qi stared blankly at Lady Dark Goldwater and asked, "Ready for what?" Lady Dark Goldwater gave the surroundings a lingering glance. Suddenly, her body trembled, and all the jade essence paste on the jade dais transformed into a clump of purple mist, wrapping around the purple soul heaven lotus and Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul. Then, it transformed into a beam of watery light and shot into Wu Qi's forehead. Wu Qi's nascent divinity trembled, and his vision turned dark as he fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 358. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, a vast ocean, a clump of earthy energy, a green forest, a sea of fire, and a mountain of blades were hovering in the boundless spiritual ocean. These were the manifestations of the innate 5 elements energy in his spiritual ocean, directly resonating with the 10 innate Jin Dan cores in the meridians of his arms. The phoenix fire pouch hovered above the vast ocean, earthy energy, green forest, sea of fire, and mountain of blades. From time to time, innate energies of 5 colors would fly up and fuse into the phoenix fire pouch, allowing the divine flame of order to refine them, making the flame grow stronger and stronger. Two divine lights of purple and green illuminated the entire spiritual ocean, causing purple mist to rise and green light to flicker in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, making it look like a cave abode of an immortal, filled with endless mysteries. His nascent divinity, which he had formed in advance with the help of the heavenly thunder, was sitting neatly underneath the phoenix fire pouch. From time to time, he would spit out wisps of golden light and fuse them into the purple-clear divine flame, improving the communication between him and the flame. The innate energies of 5 elements in the surroundings kept fusing into his nascent divinity, making it more condensed, purer, and filled with more miraculous transformations. A wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul rushed into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean along with a large amount of jade essence paste from the jade dais, then abruptly transformed into a clump of dazzling purple-golden light that spread in all directions. The purple-golden light transformed into countless restrictive runes and imprinted themselves into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, fusing with the purple mist and golden light that rose from his spiritual ocean. Some of them even fused with his soul and transformed nascent divinity. As the last wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit was about to attach itself onto Wu Qi's soul, the divine flame of order swayed and suddenly transformed into a towering flame, burning towards the last wisp of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit. Lady Dark Goldwater, who was left with only a wisp of her broken soul, had struggled for countless years, and had just dispersed all the power in her broken soul, was struck dumb. Suddenly she screamed, "Divine flame of order? How could such a damned thing exist?" Her shrill cries echoed slowly in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. The unconscious Wu Qi failed to control the divine flame of order, and the flame that had gone out of control burned the last thread of Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit into nothingness. A great amount of memories and experiences rushed into Wu Qi's nascent divinity from her disintegrated true spirit like rivers returning to the sea. Lady Dark Goldwater's life experiences, all her understanding of the Tao, all the divine abilities and mystic techniques she had cultivated, of all of her memories were inherited by Wu Qi. Meanwhile, the last wisp of her true spirit, the last hope of reincarnation, was completely wiped out by the divine flame. Of order. Of Qi the divine divinity. Finally, of Wu Qi of the divine divinity, and of Qi, and of consciousness, and of the knowledge of Qi. The amount of knowledge contained in Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul was too vast and profound. The process lasted for a full 7 days and 7 nights, and finally, all the knowledge gradually belonged to Wu Qi. Finally, Wu Qi, who was knocked unconscious by the enormous amount of knowledge, slowly opened his eyes. Sitting cross-legged on the shattered jade platform, Wu Qi frowned as he tried to recall what had happened. From the memory of Lady Dark Goldwater's broken soul, he found out what she had done to him, and could not help but curse under his breath. As a 6th-tier gold immortal, even if her mental age was a little childish, she was definitely not someone who could be easily provoked. What Lady Dark Goldwater had done had proved this point. She was beaten to the point where she was left with only a wisp of her broken soul, and suffered from the wanton harassment of those fiends day and night. Lady Dark Goldwater was too embarrassed to ask for help from her master. Another reason was that she had to use all her energy to resist the attacks from the fiends, and thus, she did not have the energy to ask for help from her master. Just now, with the enormous energy transformed from the jade essence paste that had been stored in the jade platform for several tens of thousands of years, she used it to protect her broken soul and shattered the purple soul heaven lotus that had protected her broken soul for several tens of thousands of years. Then, with the magical power of the lotus, she extracted a wisp of her true spirit, combined all the energy of her immortal soul, the curse of the fiends, and the energy transformed from the jade essence paste into one, forming an immortal restrictive spell called Dark Soul Captivation, which imprisoned Wu Qi's nascent divinity and soul. Although the combined power of the three was far weaker than the peak strength Lady Dark Goldwater possessed, it was still powerful enough to fight against a full force strike of an 18th-tier gold immortal. The Dark Soul Captivation spell formed from such a powerful force had imprisoned Wu Qi's soul and nascent divinity, leaving Wu Qi with no ability to resist. This restrictive spell would decide Wu Qi's life and death. With a single thought from Lady Dark Goldwater, who controlled the restrictive spell, Wu Qi's soul would vanish into thin air. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's plan, she used the restrictive spell to imprison Wu Qi's soul, then fused the last wisp of her true spirit into Wu Qi's soul, using Wu Qi's soul to nourish her own true spirit. At the same time, she could give Wu Qi advice and teach him the great Tao of Gold Immortal. This was equivalent to having a 6th-tier Gold Immortal following Wu Qi at all times, teaching Wu Qi everything Lady Dark Goldwater had learned in her entire life. At the same time, Lady Dark Goldwater had also controlled Wu Qi with the restrictive spell. With that, Wu Qi could only listen to her orders, becoming a tool for her to exact revenge. When Wu Qi's cultivation base was strong enough and he ascended to the immortal realm, his soul would transform into an immortal soul, and Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit would be able to be gradually reborn and grow stronger with the help of his immortal soul. Perhaps she would not need to reincarnate in the end. As long as she extracted enough soul source energy from Wu Qi's immortal soul, she would be able to regather her immortal soul and reconstruct her immortal body. It would save her a lot of hard work. Once Lady Dark Goldwater achieved her goal and successfully reconstructed her immortal soul without reincarnating, it would be hard to tell what would happen to Wu Qi at that point of time. However, right after Lady Dark Goldwater entered Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, she excitedly dispersed all the energy in her broken soul, transforming it into the Dark Een Soul Captivation to control Wu Qi. As a result, her true spirit had lost all the energy protecting it. Before it could merge with Wu Qi's soul, it was turned into nothingness by the divine flame of order, which had its own spirituality. All her knowledge and experience had become Wu Qi's hands. However, the Dark Een Soul Captivation had been successfully activated, smoothly controlling Wu Qi's soul and nascent divinity. On top of that, after losing the suppression from Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit, the restrictive spell was like a ticking time bomb, and it began to count down automatically. According to Wu Qi's estimation, it would take about 1,000 years for the Dark Een Soul Captivation to explode and completely destroy his soul. What a treacherous old woman! Do you really have to do this? Wu Qi's body was trembling with anger. This was a restrictive spell cast by an 18th-tier Gold Immortal. Even if Wu Qi exerted all his strength, would he be able to break free from the Dark Een Soul Captivation in just 1,000 years? He could understand Lady Dark Goldwater's eagerness to seek revenge, and he could understand why she was so cautious and worried about him. But, did she really have to use such a vicious restrictive spell? She was worried about the disciple she had just taken in, so she used such a vicious restrictive spell to control her disciple. This Lady Dark Goldwater was indeed a person who would wipe out an entire clan at the slightest provocation. She was really merciless in her attacks. Smiling bitterly, Wu Qi rose to his feet and said in a low voice, "I'll take it one step at a time. The Dark Een Soul Captivation is not necessarily impossible to get rid of." His nascent divinity trembled slightly. Wu Qi could clearly sense that a thread of pure Een energy, as soft and gentle as water, had quietly coiled around his nascent divinity and 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. Every single particle of Wu Qi's soul and nascent divinity was infected by this pure Een energy, and had fused with it. It could not be separated or expelled. On top of that, this pure Een energy was absorbing the innate energy in Wu Qi's body and growing stronger. Without the suppression from Lady Dark Goldwater's true spirit, this thread of pure Een energy was following the original function of the Dark Een Soul Captivation to destroy the soul and nascent divinity, growing on its own like a cancer cell. In about 1,000 years, the Dark Een energy would grow to its limit, and the Dark Een Soul Captivation would explode. At that time, Wu Qi, who had fused with it, would have his soul destroyed by the explosion. Lady Dark Goldwater's reckless action had not only delayed her own life, it had also pushed Wu Qi to the edge of a cliff. "I'll take it one step at a time." Dark Een Soul Captivation? The most powerful soul-restricting technique found in the Dark Een Grand Magic of Lady Divine Water of Dark Een True Water Palace? Dark Een True Water Palace? The supreme overlord of transformative in heavenly realm? Lady Divine Water? What a freak. She's actually an experienced first-tier gold immortal? A rare first-tier gold immortal who had survived dozens of eons in the heavenly cycle world? An old witch who is only one step away from stepping into the realm of primordial? Tisk, apart from Lady Dark Goldwater, Dark Een True Water Palace has 18 gold immortals? The transformative Een heavenly realm and the tens of thousands of heavenly realms around it are all under the jurisdiction of Dark Een True Water Palace? And Lady Divine Water is an immortal official who has been appointed as an official? She's in charge of the 100,000 heavenly realms around it? She has a high position and great power, and she is indeed an incredible figure. Dark Een Water Scripture, is this the technique cultivated by Lady Divine Water? Not bad at all. Is this the true face of this world? With Pangu World as the core, the heavenly realms revolve around it in the boundless void? Sitting cross-legged on the broken jade platform, Wu Qi lowered his head and began to ponder with a frown. In the Scroll of Stealing, the shadowy figure had also described the true face of this world to Wu Qi. Pangu World was a complete world, extremely vast, with only one lonely continent. At all times, it was absorbing the source energy of the universe, expanding its size. Pangu World was boundless, with endless resources and natural energies, and countless strange and peculiar creatures. It was created by the ancient great Saint Pangu at the sacrifice of his own body, a blessed land for all living beings to multiply and grow. When Wu Qi came to this world, he instinctively discovered that this world was completely different from the Pangu world in the shadowy figure's memory. Therefore, he was not sure where exactly he had come to. But now, after obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, and comparing it with the knowledge passed down to Wu Qi by the shadowy figure in the Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi finally confirmed the world he was in, Pangu World, also known as the Immortal Realm, Heaven Realm, or any other random names. In short, this was the place he was in. Obviously, the shadowy figure was extremely ancient, many times more ancient than Lady Dark Goldwater's master. According to the shadowy figure, there were countless almighty experts living in Pangu World, and at that time, in order to manage the universe, they were preparing for the Celestial Court. But, according to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, the Celestial Court was an extremely ancient authority. Although it had gone through countless wars, and many celestial emperors had fallen in the wars, the Celestial Court still stood strong, and was still an enormous power that ruled over Pangu World nominally. The so-called universe, these heavenly realms of various sizes, were actually the landmasses that fell off from Pangu continent during the wars that occurred during the eons. They were transformed into stars by almighty experts, and they orbited around Pangu continent. There were also some heavenly realms that were sealed in subspace, forming an independent world. However, the stars in these heavenly realms were also the landmasses that fell off from Pangu continent. This is the true face of this world today. Wu Qi swallowed a lump in his throat and grinned coldly. Chapter 359. After piecing together Lady Dark Goldwater's memories and comparing them with what the shadowy figure had told him in the Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi's understanding of this world had deepened and deepened, and he had also vaguely grasped some of the secrets hidden in this world. When the tremor in his soul had completely calmed down, Wu Qi took out a healing spirit pill and healed his body, which was severely injured by Lady Dark Goldwater. After that, he rose to his feet, walked to the bottom of the green jade dais, and stepped heavily on a pale green jade brick on the ground. The jade platform moved away soundlessly, revealing a hole with a circumference of about 10 feet. Without hesitation, he leaped into the hole, descended several hundred feet deep, and arrived at a quiet chamber that measured less than 100 feet in both width and length. The walls of the chamber were paved with fine jade, and countless patterns of rolling waves were engraved on its surface. Right in the middle of the chamber was a lone grayish-white hassock, and on top of it was a pile of broken bodies. Carefully, Wu Qi walked over, stood in front of the hassock, and bowed 3 times to the pile of dead bodies. Even if you have an evil intention, after all, we were master and disciple for 1 day and 1 night. I'll definitely avenge you, and I won't leave a single person in Green City alive. But there is still an enormous amount of energy essence left in your body. Isn't it a waste to waste it like this? Piled on the hassock was Lady Dark Goldwater's fleshly body. However, the once beautiful lady's head was chopped off, her limbs were broken, and there were 7 transparent holes on her chest, from which a faint dark smoke was rising. Although her face looked as if it was alive, and the color of her skin and flesh looked exactly the same as a real human, this immortal body had lost all its vitality and was emanating an aura of death that chilled one's heart. After bowing 3 more times to Lady Dark Goldwater, Wuqi took out the Phoenix Fire pouch and refined Lady Dark Goldwater's body into blood crystals. 18,000 fist-sized, blood-red blood crystals with a faint purple tint on their surface were gathered in these blood crystals. They were all the remaining energy essence left in Lady Dark Goldwater's fleshly body. The power contained in each blood crystal was almost equal to the full cultivation base of a high-level heaven immortal. If Wuqi were to consume one of them, his fleshly body would definitely explode on the spot. Carefully, Wuqi placed the blood crystals into the Black Dragon spirit ring. After that, he gave the hassock another 3 kowtows. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Your soul has already dissipated. There's no point in keeping a broken body. It's just a waste of the remaining essence energy. I have no malice towards you. You were the one who acted recklessly and destroyed the last hope of rebirth. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Standing up, Wuqi grabbed the jade futon. The pale gray cattail hassock felt cold in his hand. Wuqi sent a wisp of his soul consciousness into it, and immediately he received a counterattack from the immense soul consciousness inside the cattail hassock. The divine will that Wuqi sent into the cattail hassock collapsed instantly. He coughed out a mouthful of blood and nearly threw the hassock away. The jade hassock was one of the 9 precious treasures that Lady Dark Goldwater carried with her, the Dark Een hassock. It contained a wisp of Dark Een true water aura, which could restrain inner devils. It was the nemesis of all Een flames, poisonous flames, ghost flames, demon flames, and fiend flames under the heaven. Unless it was the pure yang heavenly flame, all other flames would be restrained by it. When one was cultivating with the Dark Een hassock as a cushion, he would be able to resist all the attacks from fiends and evil flames. Apart from that, the jade hassock could also be used to attack. Once it struck, it would turn into a pale gray tornado of ice and snow. It was bitingly cold and contained 99 types of extreme Een water to attack the enemy. If an ordinary immortal was caught in the tornado, without a magical treasure that could restrain it, his immortal body would be frozen, and his immortal soul would be sealed in ice. Wuqi did not know the immensity of the heaven and earth, and he was lucky that he was only rebounded by the divine will when he tried to retrieve the Dark Een hassock. It was a magical treasure of a 6th-tier gold immortal, and the item spirit's cultivation base had reached a level that ordinary immortals could not even imagine. Wuqi coughed out a mouthful of blood onto the Dark Een hassock. Large sheets of white snowflakes shot out from the hassock, and a very strong Dark Een water vapor burst out from it. Amidst the water vapor, a translucent item spirit, about 1 foot tall, shaped like a seahorse but with 6 pairs of transparent wings on its back, slowly rushed out. This beautiful creature had a pair of eyes that shone like 6 sapphires. He gave Wuqi a deep look, then said coolly, "Has Lady Jellyfish's soul completely vanished? I can sense that her aura has completely vanished." A tremendous cold pressure enveloped Wuqi. Wuqi's body turned stiff, not daring to make even the slightest movement. The feeling this item spirit gave Wuqi was at least 10 times stronger than the pressure from the broken soul of Lady Dark Goldwater. Shockingly, this item spirit had the cultivation base of a gold immortal as well. Although a spirit immortal cultivated by an item spirit did not have a fleshly body, and was greatly restricted, unable to unleash the overall strength that corresponded to his cultivation base, the spiritual pressure of a spirit immortal was not restricted. The immortal pressure of a gold immortal immediately suppressed Wuqi, rendering him unable to move. Clenching his teeth and staring at the item spirit of the Dark Een hassock, Wuqi said in a deep voice, "Yes, She wanted to attach her true spirit to my soul, absorbing the energy of my soul to repair herself. However, I once had a fortuitous encounter, and subdued a thread of divine flame of order, hiding it in my spiritual ocean. She accidentally bumped into it, and her soul was destroyed. The little seahorse item spirit cried out in shock. How could I encounter such an unlucky thing? But it is not strange at all. After all, she was poisoned by her best friend, who she regarded as her life and death friend, and even had 99% of the spirit herbs and treasures in her palace taken away. It is only natural that she was unlucky enough to bump into the divine flame of order, an innate divine flame that specializes in hurting souls and divine will. The item spirit breathed out a long sigh, then shook its head and said, "Does that mean I'm free now?" Wu Qi laughed dryly, nodded and said, "You are free now. You can go wherever you want, no one will restrain you, no one." Before he could finish, the item spirit of the dark Inhasik had already unleashed a nearly corporeal divine will, circling around Wu Qi's body. Frowning, he said, "The aura emanating from you is a little strange." Did I sense it wrong? There is no mistaking it, it is that aura. The item spirit sprung up into the air and circled around Wu Qi twice, then cried out loudly, "Hey, kid, do you have anything strange with you?" Countless thoughts flashed across Wu Qi's mind in an instant. "What strange thing?" he asked with a deep voice. The item spirit shook its head and circled around Wu Qi a few times, then suddenly plunged into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi felt a bone-piercing cold airflow quickly circulating a few times in his body, flowing through his main meridians, then plunged into his spiritual ocean. All of a sudden, he heard a joyful laughter coming out from his spiritual ocean. It is indeed the innate water. "Kid, you have a precious treasure with you, yet you are asking me." In his spiritual ocean, the item spirit plunged into the vast ocean that stretched for several tens of thousands of miles, swimming quickly and comfortably in it. The item spirit heaved a long sigh and said, "Innate water. With its nourishment, I may have a chance to transform into an innate spirit treasure. At that time, I'll be able to get rid of this damned identity of an item spirit and become a true immortal. I won't have to work like a slave for someone else for the rest of my life." The item spirit flapped the 6 pairs of wings on its back excitedly, while beams of bright gleam shone from its eyes. At the same time, the dark Inhasik in Wu Qi's hand spun and flew up, transforming into a clump of strong grayish-white light and fusing into Wu Qi's forehead. Soon, the dark Inhasik appeared in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, unleashing a large sheet of grayish-white cold air that enveloped Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. The item spirit laughed aloud and said, "Kid, how about we make a deal? Give me 70% of the innate water energy produced in your body in the future, and when your overall strength reaches the level of a gold immortal, I'll let you control me. What do you say? 70% of the innate water energy in exchange for a promise from the dark Inhasik?" Wu Qi's mind raced, and he immediately said, "Okay." The dark Inhasik laughed out loud, humming a little tune, swimming a few laps in the vast ocean manifested in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, and then fell asleep happily. Sure enough, 70% of the innate water energy produced in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean flowed into his body. Every time the innate water energy fused into the item spirit's body, the light of the dark Inhasik became softer, and its color gradually became lighter. "Now that we have reached an agreement, how should I address you in the future?" Wu Qi asked in a deep voice. The item spirit opened his eyes and was stunned for a long time, then he frowned and said, "I had a name when I was still a living thing. After my soul was forcibly taken by Goddess Divine Water and refined into an item spirit, I forgot what I was called. Goddess Jellyfish usually calls me Hasik." "You just call me Hasik." Hasik said coolly, "Since I have lost my life, and my soul has been refined into an item spirit, things like names are not important anymore." The voice of Hasik was very cold, filled with a faint sorrow and longing. Wu Qi remained silent for a while, and only then did he send a comforting message back to Hasik with his soul. Ignoring Wu Qi, Hasik closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. After a long time, as if he was talking in his sleep, he murmured in a low voice, "If I can turn it into a primordial spirit treasure, I will be able to rebuild my nascent embryo and become a complete life again." Wu Qi did not say a word for a long while. This dark hassock was easy to get along with, at least much easier than its former owner, Lady Dark Goldwater. Moreover, it was not a greedy and evil item spirit. It was just living in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, absorbing the innate water energy for its evolution. If it were some other evil being, perhaps its first thought would be how to kill Wu Qi and take the innate water energy for itself. But after encountering Hasek, Wu Qi once again reminded himself that he had to be extra careful in the future. This time, he had met Hasek, so he behaved himself. But what if he met an evil item spirit next time? However, not all item spirits could sense the innate energy in Wu Qi's body, right? Wu Qi stared at the Hasek, at the seahorse with 6 wings and 6 eyes. According to the Scroll of Stealing, it was a great ocean biwu, ranked as the 4th tier among all the strange creatures in the universe. When cultivated to the limit, it could become a primordial immortal. This strange creature had a very strong ability to sense all water element energies found in the heaven and earth. So, it was not surprising that he could sense the innate water element aura in Wu Qi's body. Perhaps there were less than 5 such creatures in the entire universe, and Wu Qi was not worried that too many people would know about the secret in his body. But I still have to work harder in my cultivation. When I have the overall strength of a heaven immortal, as long as I exercise the aura concealing technique found in the Scroll of Stealing, even the great ocean-splitting centipede will not be able to sense my aura. While Wu Qi was immersed in his thoughts, a shrill and long howl was suddenly heard coming from the outside. Chapter 360. The miserable shriek that came from the outside came from Zhaokua. Hastily, Wu Qi ran out from the heavenly water dark palace. When he stood on the edge of the huge jade lotus leaf and looked out, he saw Zhaokua, Yan Qijuan, and the others soaked in the vast heavenly true water, their bodies covered in frost. Yan Qijuan and the others had long fainted due to the extreme cold, and only Zhaokua still had some strength left. He was floating on the surface of the water, shivering and screaming, "Help! I'm going to die! Help me!" Zhaokua's screams were extremely tragic. Every time he screamed, it sounded like hundreds of wild boars were stabbed in the buttocks at the same time. His screams shook the surrounding water, causing large ripples to form on the surface of the water. However, every time he let out a cry, his body would tremble for a while. He had to endure this period of trembling, and only when he had a little bit of strength left could he let out the next cry. Wu Qi leaped down and landed on a huge lotus leaf right next to Zhaokua. He looked at Zhaokua, who was covered in a layer of frost and had his eyes rolled up, and said, "Don't worry, the heavenly true water won't freeze anyone to death. Be it a mortal or a gold immortal, they won't die from the cold, but they will feel very uncomfortable. Be it a mortal or a gold immortal, they will feel the same. But it is very beneficial to the body." Zhaokua stared at Wu Qi, his body trembling. His brain was so frozen that it was nearly frozen together. His mind was completely blank, but instinctively he opened his mouth and let out another loud cry, "Help! Help! I'm going to die!" With a wry smile on his face, Wu Qi pulled out a handful of aerial roots that were as thin as hair from the thick stalk between the lotus leaves, then plucked the pomegranate-shaped fruits hanging from them. These fruits were called heavenly fruits, and could only grow and reproduce in the heavenly true water. They had only one effect, and that was when tempering one's fleshly body or immortal body with the heavenly true water, it would increase the pain suffered by the body by 100 times, thus strengthening the fleshly body and immortal body by 100 times. With a cruel smile on his face, Wu Qi pried open Zhaokua's mouth, shoved a heaven incense into his mouth, then shattered it into pieces with a flick of his finger. The sticky, light blue liquid slid down Zhaokua's throat and into his stomach. Zhaokua opened his mouth, intending to let out a miserable howl. But before he could do so, he fainted because of the pain brought by the cold. Without saying a word, Wu Qi stuffed a heavenly Yin fruit into the mouths of Yan Qijuan and the other old demon kings. In an instant, Xiong Wanling and the other old demon kings, who were still moving a little, fell unconscious. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then the spirit-breeding ring burst out with a large sheet of white light. In the next moment, 10,000 longbow men, Goldhorn and Silverhorn, and Chi-Chi were thrown into the heavenly Yin true water. Dragon essence! Wu Qi turned to Long Yuan, the leader of these longbow men, and said, "Exercise your ancestral cultivation technique and absorb the water here into your body to temper your fleshly body. It will bring you great benefits. Before you exercise your cultivation technique, each of you pick 10 fruits and eat them." Long Yuan answered with a low, muffled voice. Bringing all the longbow men, they plunged into the bottom of the pool, sat down cross-legged, and began exercising their cultivation technique. Before they exercised their cultivation technique, they followed Wu Qi's instruction, picking 10 heavenly Yin fruits and swallowing them into their stomachs. Very soon, these longbowmen's bodies were covered with a thick layer of ice, and they were knocked out by the cold. However, the fleshly body of these longbowmen was simply too strong. Although they were knocked out by the cold, and their souls were frozen, the enormous energies in their meridians were still circulating. The two great pythons, Goldhorn and Silverhorn, fell into the water as well. Silverhorn happily swam crazily in the heavenly Yin true water. He was born with the nature of Yin, so even though the heavenly Yin true water made his whole body feel unbearably painful, he could clearly feel the great benefits that the heavenly Yin true water brought to his body. Therefore, he happily swam in the water. On the other hand, Goldhorn was very straightforward. Right after he plunged into the water, he immediately turned into a long frozen snake and sank straight into the bottom of the pool. Vaguely, there was a red light bursting out of Goldhorn's body. His innate ability was actively protecting him. Wu Qi scolded him and asked Silverhorn to take care of his elder brother, while also making them swallow a few heavenly Yin fruits. Therefore, Goldhorn howled in pain, struggled for a moment, and fainted. On the other hand, Silverhorn, who did not take it seriously at first, also fainted after swallowing a few fruits. The heavenly Yin true water was a miraculous true water that treated both mortals and gold immortals equally, and could make them faint from the extreme pain. When the pain was magnified 100 times, even a primordial immortal would faint from it, let alone these people around Wu Qi. Looking at these poor men who had fainted from the cold, Wu Qi burst out laughing. The heavenly Yin true water was a rare and precious substance under the heaven. It had a cold nature and was extremely condensed. Its unique effect was that, like a blacksmith quenching fire, it could remove the impurities from one's fleshly body and immortal body, strengthening the fleshly body. The fleshly body tempered by the heavenly Yin true water was at least 3 times stronger than that of a cultivator of the same realm and cultivation base. Naturally, the amount of energy it could contain was also a few times greater. If a cultivator could stay awake and carefully temper his entire body with the heavenly Yin true water, he could strengthen his fleshly body by at least 100 times. This was an extremely frightening effect, as it basically meant that he would be invincible within the same realm, as well as the possibility of challenging those who were stronger than him. The reason why there was so much heavenly Yin true water outside Lady Dark Goldwater's temporary imperial abode was because of the huge vase on the roof of the heavenly Water Dark Palace. The vase was also a rare and good treasure. Over the years, it had been absorbing water element energy, producing such a large area of heavenly Yin true water. He raised his head and gave the huge vase a look, then swallowed 10 heavenly Yin fruits in one go, as well as a total of 30 blood crystals refined with the fleshly body of a heaven immortal. After that, he exercised the dragon transformation script and plunged into the heavenly Yin true water, sinking deep into the bottom of the pool. A clump of dark mist rushed out from his side, transforming into a ferocious flood dragon. It threw its head back and gave a long roar into the sky. Immediately, the bone-piercingly cold heavenly Yin true water in the surroundings rushed into Wu Qi's body like birds flying into the woods. Amidst a series of cracking noises, countless cracks appeared on Wu Qi's skin, and the biggest piece of his skin was the size of a sesame seed. Wisps of dark blood rushed out from Wu Qi's body, bringing with them a pungent stench as they were quickly purified by the rolling heavenly Yin true water. A huge amount of sticky and cold heavenly Yin true water rushed into Wu Qi's body, filling every single cell in his body and soaking him in the extremely cold heavenly Yin true water. Wu Qi let out a painful howl and nearly fainted like Zhao Kuo and the others. However, the heaven immortal blood crystals he swallowed exploded inside his body like a bomb, sending an endless stream of heat surging through his entire body. A dazzling golden light burst out from Wu Qi's body. Amidst the blinding light, his skin suddenly turned into nothingness, exposing a clump of bloody flesh. The golden light converged on the surface of Wu Qi's body, and his skin began to grow back quickly. Amidst a series of cracking noises, all the tendons, bones, blood vessels, muscles, and internal organs in Wu Qi's body were being run through by the scorching stream of dragon transformation script, which came with a trace of wild and untamed aura. Abruptly, Wu Qi's body expanded to 1 foot tall, and a faint dragon scale-shaped halo emerged from under his skin. The heavenly Yin true water swirled and was injected into Wu Qi's body. Dark and foul-smelling blood kept spraying out from his body, while an aura that felt ancient, and like that of a great beast from the primeval times kept spreading out from his body. The strength of his body was increasing rapidly, while his meridians and acupoints were strengthened by several dozens of times. The energies that filled his meridians immediately became as insignificant as a small stream in a dried-up river. Wu Qi opened his mouth and swallowed another 30 heaven immortal blood crystals. An even stronger stream of heat flowed quickly through his body, while all 10 innate Jin Dan were absorbing energy essence at full speed, transforming into enormous innate energies that circulated around his body. While silently exercising the 7 foundation establishment technique to improve the grade of Jin Dan, replenishing the energies in his body and improving the strength of his fleshly body, Wu Qi divided his mind and multitasked his mind. By carrying out a few steps at the same time, his overall strength was improving at a steady pace. In his Dantian, apart from the nascent soul cultivating with White Cloud Immortal Sex Energy Unity technique, a new Jin Dan was gradually taking shape. The new Jin Dan had a grayish-white hue and was emanating a threatening cold air. Using the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing and the divine ability of Stealing the Sun, Wu Qi had once again formed a false core specially used for cultivating the Dark Yin water scripture. Theoretically, with the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, as long as Wu Qi's nascent divinity was strong enough, he could cultivate with an unlimited number of cultivation techniques. The Dark Yin water scripture was a top-grade cultivation technique, and when cultivated to its limit, it could even give birth to an innate ice flame. No matter how hard White Cloud Immortal Sex Energy Unity technique was, it could not be compared to the Dark Yin water scripture. Therefore, naturally, Wu Qi would not let go of this cultivation technique. As he had inherited all the experiences from Lady Dark Goldwater, Wu Qi kept breaking through his cultivation with an irresistible force. In just a few hours, supported by the enormous energy from the Heaven Immortal's blood crystal, the grayish-white Jin Dan in Wu Qi's Dantian suddenly cracked open, from within which, a nascent soul with a pair of blank eyes and shrouded in a strong cold air sprung out. Wu Qi's nascent divinity moved, injecting a thread of his divine sense into the false core. An enormous amount of energy kept being injected into the false core, pushing it to the peak stage of nascent soul realm in just a blink of an eye. Chapter 361. When he was done, Wu Qi breathed out a mouthful of energy, which transformed into countless sword beams and swept across the place. The thick layer of xianbing on the surrounding rock walls shattered, as countless water element energy stones of various sizes shot towards Wu Qi like a waterfall of light. With a sway of his body, all 18 celestial fiend puppets dashed out while laughing. They transformed into numerous afterimages and leaped in all directions, smashing and hacking at the surrounding rock walls. 2 heaven immortals and 2 peak-stage nascent divinity cultivators had joined forces and actually managed to put the 4 heaven immortals from Shui Yuan planet into a very difficult situation, panting heavily. Wu Qi was watching the commotion from a distance and could not help but twitch his lips. The name of this vase was Dark Yin Energy Vase, an innate spirit treasure of excellent grade. However, because it did not have an item spirit, its grade had dropped. This treasure was an expert in absorbing water element energy and could transform it into 99 types of acquired true water, and the heavenly Yin true water was one of them. Other types of acquired true water, such as those used in alchemy, fire extinguishing, flower watering, grass planting, fish rearing, and feeding livestock and demon beasts, could all be transformed by the Dark Yin Energy Vase. The only difference was that the hand incantation was different. The remaining 4 heaven immortals who were fighting with them were trapped by the silver mist, and the natural energy in the surroundings suddenly froze. The incantation of immortal magic they were preparing was interrupted, and the backlash of their immortal energy made them feel so uncomfortable that they nearly coughed blood. Bringing the 18 celestial fiend puppets with him, Wu Qi flew all the way back, collecting energy stones along the way. There were too many energy stones, and the efficiency was too low. Wu Qi had no choice but to release Long Yuan and the other longbow men. With the help of these longbow men, their brute force was endless. Their hard fists were like heavy axes and sharp blades, strong enough to break mountains and crack rocks. 10,000 longbow men were running in all directions, fighting and causing the ground to shake. Large chunks of energy stones kept falling off, and were sucked into Wu Qi's Black Dragon Spirit Ring. With this, the efficiency was increased by more than 1,000 times. Bringing 18 celestial fiend puppets and 10,000 longbow men, Wu Qi plundered everything along the way. In less than 15 minutes, they returned to the valley beneath the main peak of Mount Tianlin from the underground space where the heavenly Water Dark Palace was located. It had been more than 3 years since he last met these people. Mod and Sun Kuang gave Wu Qi a great surprise this time. Suddenly, a few pitch-black cannons on the planetary ship that looked like a city of ink suddenly shot out large sheets of crimson and golden light, smashing viciously onto the bodies of those Shui Yuan planet cultivators. Like thunderbolts, the golden light poured down with deafening booms. Relying on the support of a heaven immortal, several hundred Shui Yuan planet cultivators had been watching the battle from a close distance without any scruples. But they did not expect that the heaven immortal would be defeated so quickly and were immediately struck by the golden light. While Han Fei and Sun Kuang worked together to severely injure a celestial immortal, Su Qin and Modi didn't stop. Dark Radiance Planet had shut down the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation as well. Wu Qi's face blushed slightly. Hastily, he changed the topic and released Yen Qijuan and the others from the Spirit Breeding Ring. A pitch-black planetary ship that looked like a city of ink was seen hovering in space. Sun Kuang, Mod, Han Fei, Su Qin, and all the renowned experts of Great Yen Dynasty were on board. A faint dark gleam was emanating from the ship as a few pitch-black cannons of war machines were pointed at Shui Yuan planet. Several dozens of nascent soul cultivators of Great Yen Dynasty were controlling those war machines with incredible destructive power, deterring the surrounding Shui Yuan planet cultivators who came with ill intentions. Using the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, Feng Clan and Yu Clan, who had lost their patriarchs, were forced to open the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Very soon, they returned to White Cloud Planet. Using the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation constructed by Wu Qi on White Cloud Planet, they soon returned to G-City. But the energy stones stored here were simply too large. The greatest function of Heavenly Water Dark Palace was its ability to alter the surrounding energy veins in a small area, absorbing all natural energies and transforming them into energy stones of cold element. After several hundreds of thousands of years of accumulation, this underground space measuring over 1,000 miles in circumference was actually transformed by Heavenly Water Dark Palace. It was not hard to tell how many energy stones were stored here. Very soon, Wu Qi arrived several thousand miles away in the sky, 300 miles above the ground. Upon hearing the thunderclap, Wu Qi hastily exorcised the spirit-breeding ring and shoved all 10,000 longbow men back into it, who had obtained a great benefit. After that, Zhao Kuo and the others were sent back into the ring as well. Only Goldhorn and Silverhorn, the two brothers, were transformed into two large snakes, each about 10 feet long and as thick as a fist, and coiled lazily around his body. Before Sun Quan could do anything, Han Fei, who had an expressionless face, murmured in a low voice like a child learning how to speak. As the saying goes, punishment does not apply to scholar officials. With a gentle shake of the jade scroll in his hand, he waved a golden writing brush in his right hand. The green smoke and yellow flames that were sweeping toward them suddenly paused, and then rolled back, burning the 4 heaven immortals and the people behind them into a sorry state. "Let's go! Stop talking nonsense." Mod's face darkened, while Sun Quan said coolly, "Don't blame us. A few days ago, Dark Radiance Planet, which is the closest planet to Shui Yuan Planet, suddenly shut down its only grand universal teleportation formation. Therefore, we had no choice but to come here through the Four Corners Planet, which is the closest planet to this planet. Despite our haste, it took us so many days to get here in the vast starry sky." The group did not dwell on what happened in Shui Yuan Planet any longer. They quickly boarded the planetary ship and left for Dark Radiance Planet. Amidst miserable howls and cries, a few cultivators clad in the robe of Bai Clan from White Frost City were caught by the yellow flame. When the malicious yellow flame touched their bodies, it spread quickly, burning their flesh and skin. In just the time of a single breath, their fleshly bodies were burned into a pile of ashes. Countless energy stones shot out in all directions, then were wrapped up by Wu Qi's powerful divine will and sucked into the Black Dragon spirit ring. Enlidi burst into laughter and said, "Wu Qi, little fellow, have you rescued them?" Wu Qi retracted the sword of Greedy Wolf and flew before Mod and the others. He gave them a displeased glare and shouted, "Since you possess such a strong cultivation base, and even a few heaven immortals were beaten to a pulp by you, why did you wait until today to come and help us?" Streams of clear air rolled and rolled over from all directions, as a clump of immortal thunder, about the size of a human head and glinting with a green light, took shape in Sun Quan's palm. With a wave of his hand, the immortal thunder transformed into a beam of golden light and shot out, smashing viciously onto the heaven immortal who carried a large gourd on his back. A loud boom rang out, followed by a deafening thunderclap. The black gourd on the heaven immortal's back shattered into pieces, while the heaven immortal himself was badly mutilated. Howling miserably, he transformed into a wisp of green smoke and fled at top speed. Chapter 362. When Princess Zhonglu, Jiang Xian, and Jiang Rui launched their attack, the current sect leader of Yu Academy, Yu Wendi, was having a rest in an abode at the back of the mountain. The heavy rains suddenly hit Ji City, and in just the time to finish a pot of tea, the water on the ground was 3 feet deep. The rainwater was mixed with a pungent stench of seafood. It was the stench of fish, shrimps, and some other strange and indescribable pungent odors. Ji City, which was once the capital city of Great Yan Dynasty, had suddenly transformed into an abalone restaurant. So, it was needless to mention the stench. Before both of them could react, 2 white thunderbolts, each about 1 mile in diameter, fell soundlessly from the sky, gently landing on Mount Jade Gate. Yu Wendi was lying on a soft bed made of incense wood, with a pretty little servant girl in his arms. He was gently playing with the long and straight legs of the little servant girl, whose face was blushing. Yu Wendi looked at a handsome and elegant young man, clad in a long robe, sitting opposite him, smiled and said, "Thanks to you, my dear nephew. Otherwise, I don't know how long this injury would drag me down." Princess Zhonglu was standing on the back of a giant sea turtle, whose back was over 100 feet in circumference. Fuming with anger, she brought her men and rushed towards the direction of Mount Jade, which was located at the north of Ji City. Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui, who had just gotten rid of the obscene poison in their bodies after Catfish Flood Dragon spat a few mouthfuls of cold and pungent saliva, were following right beside her, their faces filled with killing intent. Sitting on the chariot, Yen Dan was frowning as he pondered over the message that Princess Zhonglu had sent him. Ahead of them, Princess Zhonglu, Jiang Exan, and Jiang Rui had joined hands and launched an attack. Yu Wendi narrowed his eyes, sighed, and said, "Since those immortals came here 3 years ago, undercurrents have been surging. Yiling, what do you think?" This action immediately shocked everyone in Great Yen Dynasty. Right after Princess Zhonglu brought a large army and charged out of Ji City, arriving at Mount Jade Gate, 100 miles to the north of Ji City, drums and horns were sounding in the imperial palace of Great Yen. Escorted by a large group of cultivators, a complete chariot of the emperor was seen chasing after Princess Zhongli's army of seafood. Lord Xianxing was following closely behind Princess Zhongli. Holding a large halberd in his hand, he kept sending out message talismans one after another, urging Wanyian Dragon King to bring all the mighty experts and great demons from Longyuan River as reinforcements. Lord Xianxing had only gone to the East Sea for a short period of time, so his foundation was not yet stable. He, Lao Tzu, Wanyian Dragon King, had 3 great demons of nascent divinity realm, Hanzhu, Tanshui, and Lahai, as his subordinates. On the other hand, he, Lord Xianxing, only had a few great demons of nascent divinity realm. All of them were alive and kicking, and all of them were the same as the seafood in the market. Yu Haling chuckled and said disapprovingly, "This is something that should be done. We have kept them in captivity for over 2,000 years, and it is time to release them. With their potential and disposition, as long as 3 to 5 of them can rise to a high position in the future, it will be a great benefit to us." 2 crystal-clear thunderclaps rang out. Without much commotion, the entire Mount Jade Gate was instantly turned into powder and drifted away in the wind. This group of demons and devils were used to fooling around in the East Sea, and no one restrained them with any military law. When several tens of thousands of seafood demons and devils swaggered across the sky above Ji City, some stubborn and mischievous demons and devils could not restrain themselves from exercising their innate abilities to summon wind and rain, rolling up dark clouds that blotted the sky and bringing up some sparse thunderbolts and lightning bolts that were not powerful enough to rain down the whole day. With a gloomy face, Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui exercised their energies and exercised the strongest thunder technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect, the White True Water Thunder Spell. Clouds were a form of mist, and as White Cloud Immortal Sect used White Cloud as their name, they were an expert in all kinds of water element cultivation techniques. The White True Water Thunder Spell was a technique that compressed water element energies, causing them to rub against each other at a high speed, turning them into violent thunderbolts to attack the enemy. Along the way, Princess Zhonglu had put all the blame on Yu Academy. Therefore, at this moment, Jiang Xian and Jiang Rui flew into a rage out of humiliation. Filled with a bellyful of killing intent, they clenched their jaws and swore that they would slaughter every single member of Yu Academy, especially the culprit, Yu Qianqian. They would make her taste the cruelest torture in the cultivation world, and only then could they kill her slowly. Yu Haling laughed mockingly, shook his head and said, "Those elders have lived too long in peace and have turned them into lambs. They no longer have the heroic and awe-inspiring attitude of their ancestors in the ancient times." On the other hand, although the cultivation base of these people from 6 dynasties is slightly lacking, every single one of them is a dragon and phoenix among men, a tiger, a leopard, a jackal, and a wolf. After being trained and tempered by them, those who returned to their own clans from here are now being put in an important position. The young man chuckled and said, "That's right, they have gone out." Qianqian asked them for help, and they also want to see what kind of abilities these so-called heroes, ambitious and ruthless overlords have. They also want to see the results of their arduous cultivation over the years. That's why they rushed over. As for the 2 ladies, they hated Yu Qianqian to the core, who nearly made them lose their virginity. That was the reason why they desperately mustered all their energies, staking all their everything into a single pure water white thunder spell. It just so happened that Princess Zhonglu was ready as well. Casually, she swung her sword and hacked forcefully towards Mount Yu. Jiang Exan and Jiang Rui snorted coldly as well. 2 white thunderbolts, which were only the size of a wicker basket, shot out from their mouths, and in just a blink of an eye, they had transformed into 2 white thunderbolts, each measuring about 1 mile in diameter, and shot out soundlessly. While both of them were chatting for a while, a strong light suddenly sprinkled down from the sky. Amidst a deafening thunderclap, a long sword, several tens of miles long and as thick as a thumb, hacked down from above, splitting Mount Yu into 2 halves. Thick smoke towered into the sky, as the defensive formation of Mount Yu was completely broken by the sword. All the students of Yu Academy who were diligently studying on the mountain were either killed or wounded. Yu Helling gave the surroundings a quick glance, then snorted coldly. With a blink of his body, he pulled out a strange-shaped machete and thrust it towards Princess Zhonglu. The young man nodded, smiled and said, "You're too polite, uncle. The injury is not a big deal, and with all the contributions you've made over the years, all you need to do is to choose a beast soul of excellent quality to fuse with when you return. With that, any injury will be healed." Mount Yu was the base of Yu clan of Great Yen Dynasty. Yu Academy was built on the mountain, and that was why it was named Mount Yu. It stood no more than 1 mile tall, and measured several tens of miles in circumference. The front of the main peak was filled with layers of dark green palaces and pavilions. It was the place where the students of Yu Academy studied. Meanwhile, a few exquisite and elegant pavilions could be seen at the back of the mountain, where the teachers of Yu Academy usually stayed. Touching her buttocks, Catfish Flood Dragon clenched her jaws and said, "Bald-tail dragon. If this name is spread out, it will be a disgrace." Yu Huda smiled faintly. He squeezed the girl's breast and said in a low voice, "Huda, and the others have gone out?" Catfish Flood Dragon was standing excitedly on the back of a huge seahorse, glancing left and right. She rolled up her sleeves complacently and said with a loud laugh, I've brought an army of several tens of thousands of soldiers to beat someone up. Now that's what I call awe-inspiring. As for that little girl named Yu Chanqian, let me eat her up. Even my tail has been broken by those people she brought here. I'll definitely avenge her." An auspicious 5-colored ray spread out from Princess Zhongli's body, gradually enveloping an area of 100 miles in circumference. Dark clouds rolled and rolled, covering the ground with a thickness of 10 miles, stirring up the foul wind and dark clouds that were stirred up by the sea demons. Thunderbolts as thick as a water tank were seen rolling and rocking amidst the dark clouds. The deep, muffled rumbles of thunder shook the ground violently, and tiny cracks began to appear on the surface of Mount Yu. Yu Helling was flying at an incredible speed. Before Princess Zhonglu could see the approaching blade beam, it had already arrived before her face. Although it was possible for these little demons to ride on the cloud, they still maintained their original form of fishes and shrimps, just that their bodies had become much bigger. For a moment, the sky above G-City was shrouded with dense demonic clouds. Water vapor towered into the sky, and the smell of fresh seafood drifted to a distance of several hundred miles. Standing on the ground and looking up into the sky, one's eyes were filled with lobsters, hairtails, and turtles of various sizes. Mixed among them were some great demons who had the heads of seafood and barely had the body of a human. There were also some sea demons who had attained the cultivation base of nascent soul realm and had taken the form of a human. An enormous natural force surged into Princess Zhongli's body. Her eyes shone with a faint 5-colored gleam. Once again, she had entered the state of enlightenment that all cultivators could only dream of. She slowly clasped her palms together, and a thunderbolt burst out from her palms, condensing into a blue sword that measured several tens of miles in length and was only as thick as a thumb. The sword was formed entirely from powerful electric currents, and from time to time, it would produce loud crackling noises. Mount Yu City was rich in natural energy, and the scenery was beautiful. On top of that, the back of the mountain was quiet and pleasant, and it felt like spring all year round. Because of that, Yu Wendi was severely wounded by Wu Qi with a crossbow in the middle of a snowy night. Because of that, he was unable to walk freely, so he left Yu Clan's mansion in G-City and stayed in an abode located at the back of the mountain. Princess Zhonglu rushed back to G-City in a threatening manner, followed by several hundred cultivators from White Cloud Immortal Sect. Together with Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon, the hundreds of thousands of prawn and crab soldiers under the lead of them, Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon. Among these prawn and crab soldiers, only a few of them had the cultivation base of Jindan realm. Most of them had just stepped onto the Tao of cultivation and had learned how to speak human language. The nature of the water thunder was soft and gentle, and the force of the thunder could penetrate the insides of any object. Therefore, the true water white thunder spell was best at attacking a mountain gate protected by a defensive formation. When the thunder exploded on the defensive formation, the force of the thunder could penetrate the formation and hurt the person inside. If it was used to hit someone, the person would look perfectly fine on the outside, but the inside would be smashed into a clump of blood. The five-colored divine ray behind Princess Zhongli's back soared to the height of half a sky, blanketing an area of 10 miles in circumference. Immediately, the natural energies within the area of 1,000 miles began to roll and roll rapidly. Large patches of dark clouds began to roll and roll over, with bolts of lightning twisting and darting amidst the dark clouds. Deep, muffled thunderclaps shook Mount Yu and Chi-Chi. With all her concentration, Princess Zhonglu exercised the cultivation technique inherited from her bloodline. The bun on her head was loosened, and her long hair flew up into the sky one after another. They danced and wheeled in the air, bringing together countless magnificent five-colored halos. Yu Huda left the little maidservant in his hand and fled into the sky in a panic. Among the several tens of thousands of disciples of Yu Academy on Mount Yu, only he and Yu Helling managed to make it out alive. Yu Helling sprung up into the sky, while the soul of a golden rock flew up into the sky and let out a clear cry. Spreading her palms, Princess Zhongli floated up into the sky and flew into the dark clouds that were getting denser and denser. Then she opened her mouth and began to sing an ancient, monotonous melody that repeated back and forth with the same rhythm. However, as Princess Zhongli continued to sing, the monotonous melody began to have countless changes. It was as if an inconspicuous pitch-black seed was buried underground and had begun to sprout, shoot out branches, grow leaves, and blossom flowers, emanating an endless life force. Yu Wendy nodded and said with a smile, "That's true. Speaking of which, they are indeed extraordinary. The disciples of our clan have been fighting and scheming with them for many years in G City, and each of them has made a great progress. No matter it is in dealing with people or scheming, they are much stronger than the elders of our clan." Chapter 363. When the machete was still 3 inches away from Princess Zhongli's neck, a white beam of light as thick as a fist came shooting over from an angle, slamming right into Yu Helling's body. The white beam pierced through Yu Helling's body, leaving behind a hole the size of a human head. Yu Helling let out a miserable howl as his body was sent flying up into the sky by the white beam of light. Only after flying several tens of miles up in a sorry state did he manage to stop himself. Not allowing Yu Helling to see who was the one who wounded him, Princess Zhongli clenched her teeth and flipped her wrist. With a casual flip of her wrist, the long sword condensed from countless heavenly thunders gracefully swept across Yu Helling's body. As Yu Helling did not have a spirit item for self-defense, the long sword landed squarely on his body and produced a large amount of sparks and blinding light. The sword, which was so powerful that it could split Mount Jade Gate in half, was slicing inch by inch at Yu Helling's body with great difficulty. It took 3 whole breaths of time before it managed to chop off one of Yu Helling's calves. Blood splashed and splattered in all directions, while Yu Helling howled hoarsely and painfully. His right chest was pierced through by the white beam, and his left calves were chopped off by Princess Zhonglu. The sudden severe injury nearly knocked him out. He roared hoarsely, "How dare you hurt me? You are simply lawless. Under the heavenly Tao, who dares to hurt me?" The white beam of light rose once again. Expressionlessly, Jing Ke transformed into a blinding beam and pierced through Yu Helling's head. Yu Helling's head was crushed, and his blood sprayed and blotted the sky. Yu Helling had not cultivated the Jin Dan, and he did not have a nascent soul or nascent divinity. It was just his initial 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls that were shattered by Jingku. When his mortal soul was shattered, the soul of the rock that had fused with his mortal soul did not have the time to unleash its divine power. Instead, it let out a miserable cry and exploded into countless golden specks of light. Then, another jade-colored beam rushed out from Yu Haling's body. Once again, the voice howled and roared, saying that no matter who killed his son, he would make the person who killed his son die a horrible death. However, this jade light didn't even have a chance to launch an attack this time before it was shattered by a gray spiritual light that Yen Dan shot out. Princess Zhang clenched her teeth as she stared at Yu Haling's falling body. She snorted coldly and said, "Who are these people? That shameless person is the same as you, talking about the heavenly Tao. Is killing you going against the heavenly Tao? How ridiculous! I don't see the heavenly Tao sending down a lightning tribulation to strike me." Hovering in midair, Yu Wendi stared blankly at the flattened Mount Yu. He yelled at the top of his lungs, clenched his fists tightly, and ran towards Yen Dan's chariot, which was rushing towards him at top speed. "Your Majesty, what crime has Yu League committed? Why did you exterminate the entire Yu Academy?" The chariot pulled by Yen Dan and the 3 strange black birds flew up quickly. Sitting on the chariot, Yen Dan coldly looked at Yu Wendi, who was hovering in midair, and said with an indifferent tone, "I didn't think that Master Yu would have a pretty good cultivation base. All these years, I've made a wrong judgment." Yu Wendi was taken aback. He lowered his head and looked down at his feet, and saw that he was hovering about 1 mile above the ground. For a long time, Yu Clan of Great Yen was famous for being an ordinary person who only knew how to read and write. The people of Yu Clan had never revealed their cultivation base in front of others. Even when he was ambushed by Wu Qi with a crossbow, Yu Wendi had used an immortal talisman that Yu Qianqian found by chance, which could automatically protect himself. Now, when faced with Yen Dan's question, Yu Wendi was stunned for a moment. Then he said angrily, "Is this the reason why Yu League was exterminated?" Princess Zhanglu, whose eyes were flickering with a faint 5-colored gleam, was still immersed in the state of enlightenment. Her voice was cold and emotionless as she slowly descended from the dark cloud. She hovered next to Yen Dan's chariot and said coldly, "Yu Wendi, don't tell me that you don't know what that bitch Yu Qianqian has done." Yu Wendi's voice trailed off. What did Yu Qianqian do? He knew it very well. Furthermore, he did not object to Yu Qianqian's previous methods, which seemed to be too aggressive and violent. In Yu Wendi's opinion, intense conflicts were also a method to train his disciples. However, he never expected that Princess Zhongli's reaction was so intense that it was beyond an ordinary person. She actually resorted to the most direct and violent method and destroyed Yu Academy. Yu Wendi stared blankly at Princess Zhonglu, sighed and said, "What did Qianqian do? I've been recuperating in seclusion these days, and I didn't pay much attention to what Qianqian did. If she has offended you in any way, please forgive her, Your Highness. But no matter what Qianqian has done, the sins of Yu Academy are not worthy of death." Princess Zhonglu said indifferently, "She brought a man named Yu Hetian with her, and tried to offend me by force, seizing my true yin energy so that he could cultivate his cultivation technique. Yu Wendi, Yu Qianqian is bold enough to offend your superiors, and her actions are akin to treason. She deserves to have her entire clan executed. Take your own life, and I'll kill all your clan members in G City for you. You don't have to thank me." Yu Wendi was so angry that he nearly coughed out blood. Pointing his trembling finger at Princess Zhonglu, he suddenly cried out hoarsely, "You've destroyed the foundation of Yu Academy. I'll fight you to the death." Before his voice could fade away, Qin Weong had already shot right next to Yu Wendi. Casually, he thrust his palm onto Yu Wendi's chest and shattered all his ribs. Qin Weong was a ruthless man. Grinning coldly, he pulled out a pitch-black iron chain that was covered with countless barbs. Using his fingers, he pierced the chain through Yu Wendi's shoulder blades, thrusting the chain into his shoulders and locking his ability to move. Yu Wendi shrieked in pain. However, before Qin Weong, who had an absolute advantage in overall strength, there was no room for him to struggle. Without hesitation, Qin Weiyang grabbed Yu Wendy's neck and dragged him to the front of Yan Dan's chariot as if he was grabbing a chicken. Then he gave a heavy kick to Yu Wendy's knees and shattered them, forcing him to kneel on a clump of thin cloud. Yan Dan looked down at Yu Wendy from above, then said coolly, "Over the years, there have been several upheavals in Great Yan Dynasty, and I suppose they are all related to Master Yu? For several hundred years, Yu clan has been making things difficult for Great Yan Dynasty all the time. I guess it's been hard on you." Yu Wendy's body trembled. He raised his head and cried out in shock. "What did you say?" I. Yan Dan waved his hand, sighed softly and said, "Don't explain and don't quibble. What I know is much more than what you think I should know. If not because I have the intention to use Yu Academy to test the disciples of Imperial Clan, and use you to temper the ministers of the Imperial Court, how could I allow you to act so presumptuously for so many years? Master Yu, don't you find it strange? Why is Su Qin hiding in your editorial institute? Why is it that after so many years, although the number of disciples of Yu Academy in the Imperial Court is increasing day by day, none of them is able to hold a real position of power?" With great difficulty, Yu Wendy raised his head and glared at Yan Dan. Yan Dan stared at Yu Wendy coldly and said, "There are some things that I can do and I can tolerate. There are some things that I can't do, and once I do, I will have to pay the price. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, there are some lines that you can never cross. You tempted the disciples of Great Yan Imperial Clan to plot against and attack each other. That is because they are useless and I can tolerate that. But you are pushing your luck and even attacked Zixien. So, is your next step going to assassinate me? This is something that I can't tolerate." Raising his right hand, Yan Dan grinned coldly and said, "Execute all the officials from Yu Academy, and execute all their clans with the crime of treason. Summon the disciples of Mo sect and Sun sect to replace the empty spots left by those depressed officials." Looking at the dumbfounded Yu Wendy, Yan Dan shook his head and said mockingly, "Do you really think that after leaving Yu Academy, Great Yan Dynasty can't even carry out the state affairs smoothly? You've underestimated Great Yan, and I, Yan Dan, am way too much." Jing Ku, Qin Weiyang, Tian Guang, Fan Yuqi, Yu Yi, and a few other captains of Great Yan bowed and received the order, and were about to leave with their men. Looking at Yu Wendy's pale face, Yan Dan suddenly laughed delightfully. Then, he transmitted his voice to Yu Wendy. "Do you know why I've tolerated you for so many years? Firstly, I want to use Yu Academy to temper the disciples of Imperial Clan. Secondly, after receiving the guidance from an immortal, my cultivation base has improved by leaps and bounds over the past 3 years. Vaguely, I can feel that the heavenly tribulation is just around the corner. Once I transcend the heavenly tribulation, I will become a heaven immortal." Suddenly, Yu Wendy laughed coldly like a madman. He stared at Yan Dan and said, "So what if you are a heaven immortal?" Yan Dan stared at Yu Wendy, nodded slowly and said, "A heaven immortal is indestructible." Yu Wendy stared at Yan Dan mockingly, keeping his mouth shut and not saying a word. The mocking gaze made Yan Dan fly into a rage. Grinning coldly, he said, "Zixien, send Master Yu on his way. Yu clan has been tossing and turning for so many years, and they must be tired. It's time for all Yu clan members to rest." A bright gleam flickered in her eyes. Princess Zhonglu, who was still immersed in the state of enlightenment, nodded her head slowly. Then she waved her right hand and chopped off Yu Wendy's head. Yu Wendy's head flew up into the sky. But when his head flew up into the air, he let out a long laugh and said, "Kill all the members of Yu clan. Wipe out the 9 generations of my clan? Yan Dan, you will never be able to exterminate my descendants. Haha, death is nothing to me. When a man is born, he must die. This is the great Tao of the heaven and earth." Princess Zhongli's face darkened. A 5-colored divine ray burst out from both of her palms, grabbing tightly onto Yu Wendy's head and squeezing it lightly, crushing it into powder. After vanishing Yu Huda's soul with the 5-colored divine ray, Princess Zhonglu frowned and said, Why don't I see Yu Qianqian? While Princess Zhonglu was still talking about Yu Qianqian, a strong beam of light was seen approaching from the south. Amidst the bright beam, Yu Qianqian, whose dress was stained with blood and had a pale face, was seen flying towards them. From afar, she happened to see the scene of Princess Zhonglu crushing Yu Heda's head into pieces. A heart-wrenching and lung-splitting howl rang out, as Yu Qianqian cried out fiercely, "Zhonglu, you bitch! I'll fight you to the death for the rest of my life. Father!" Tears of blood rolled down her cheeks as a dark purple talisman flew out from Yu Qianqian's left hand, emanating a mighty evil aura. When the talisman left her hand, it immediately transformed into a huge dark cloud that measured several miles in circumference. Gradually, a dazzling dark gleam shone out from within the dark cloud, and after that, it shrunk inwardly and expanded rapidly, turning into a black hole that measured about 1 mile in diameter, hovering above Mount Yu. Shrill ghost howls rushed out from the black hole, as 4 dark green skinny claws suddenly stretched out from it, grabbing the edge of the black hole. A strong ghost aura that made one feel uneasy burst out from the black hole, as a ferocious and hideous ghost head, measuring over 1,000 feet in diameter, slowly squeezed out from the black hole. Yu Qianqian cried out fiercely, "This is the 9th heavenly ghost summoned from the ghost realm. All of you must die today." Amidst Yu Qianqian's shrill cry, a heavenly ghost that stood over 10,000 feet tall, shaped like a monkey, had a long tail, and was entirely dark green in color with black spots on its body. It was a ferocious and hideous heavenly ghost. Its hind legs were muscular, while its upper body had a pair of sharp claws that stretched over 100 feet long. Right after it dashed out from the black hole, it threw its head back and let out a long howl. Amidst the dark cloud, the army of seafood brought by Lord Xianxing exploded into countless clumps of blood and gore amidst the long howl. Chapter 364. "What a tough skin," cried Wu Qi in astonishment. "This heavenly ghost truly deserves its reputation." Princess Zhongli's pretty face turned cold. Hastily, she told Wu Qi everything that had happened in the past few days. Amidst a shrill howl, the sword of Greedy Wolf stabbed right into the heavenly ghost's chest. A crisp noise rang out as General Greedy Wolf was knocked several hundred feet back. A 1-foot-long, 1-inch-deep wound was torn open on the heavenly ghost's chest, from which a few drops of dark and stinking blood dripped out. The heavenly ghost did not suffer too much damage. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, unless one used the divine ability of Buddhist League to subdue ghosts, or the extremely rare Tranquil Cloud from Tao League, it was extremely difficult to kill these troublesome heavenly ghosts. Generally speaking, heavenly ghosts possessed the overall strength to challenge those who were 3 levels higher than them. In other words, an ordinary heavenly ghost with the cultivation base of 36th tier heaven immortal could challenge a 33rd tier heaven immortal by relying on its tough skin. "What happened?" asked Wu Qi in shock as he stared at the strange phenomenon in the sky. Wu Qi smiled as he wrapped his arms around Princess Zhongli's slender waist and said, "I'm fine. Not even a single hair of mine is hurt." Wu Qi could only laugh dryly. It was not just a single hair of his that was hurt, as he had nearly been killed a few times in Shuiyuan planet. Especially when he was tortured by Lady Dark Goldwater, the few kowtows that made Wu Qi throw up blood. But how could he tell Princess Zhonglu about this? Yan Qijuan, who had rushed over from behind Wu Qi, was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. This was the precious daughter he loved dearly. The heavenly ghost, who had a huge body but was extremely agile, let out a long howl. Suddenly, it turned its head and fixed its gaze at Wu Qi. When Wu Qi and his company walked out from the teleportation formation, a towering murderous aura filled the air near Mount Yumen. The howls of ghosts shook the city and knocked many common people to the ground. The sinecures of Great Yan's Cloud Swallow Pavilion had been dispatched, activating all the defensive mechanisms around G-City. One after another, the defensive formations that were reinforced by the experts of White Cloud Immortal Sect rose up one after another. The invisible ghost howls smashed onto the defensive formations, sending out a large sheet of pale green light, as if a ball of ghost fire had enveloped the entire G-city. Like living beings, these heavenly ghosts had the ability to mate and reproduce with each other. As a result, the number of heavenly ghosts on the fragment grew larger and larger, and one day, a great war broke out between them and other immortals and demons. As a result of the war, the ghost realm officially became an existence recognized by all factions. However, it was also sealed by the joint forces of the almighty experts. Heavenly ghosts below the strength of golden immortals could not freely enter and exit the ghost realm. All of a sudden, the sword exploded, and countless bolts of lightning exploded on Sky Ghost's body like flood dragons. The bolts of lightning shot in all directions, scaring many great yen cultivators who were besieging the heavenly ghosts and forcing them to flee in panic. However, a few unlucky cultivators of Jindan realm were struck by the bolts of lightning. Howling miserably, they fell to the ground with black smoke billowing out of their bodies, twitching violently with tiny sparks flying all over their bodies. Heavenly ghosts with the strength of gold immortals and above could barely control their instinct to devour life force, flesh, and blood. Therefore, they did not pose too much of a threat to other living beings. As for those heavenly ghosts with the strength of gold immortals and below, they mostly acted according to their instinct. If they were in the ghost realm, their instinct was to reproduce to their heart's content, and if they were in other galaxies or heavenly realms, their instinct was to hunt down immortals and mortals, devouring their energy essence, flesh, and blood. Ghost realm? Nether ghost realm? Heavenly ghosts? Those heavenly ghosts born in the ghost realm? Princess Zhongli breathed out a sigh of relief when she heard Wu Qi say that he was not injured. Then she thought of Yan Qijuan and asked, "What about my father? He is not dead, is he?" Wu Qi hugged Princess Zhongli tightly. In front of Yan Dan, Yan Qijuan, and all the cultivators of Great Yen, he gave Princess Zhongli a deep kiss on her red lips. Princess Zhongli struggled weakly for a while, then gently smashed her little hand on Wu Qi's chest, and simply reached out her arms and wrapped them around Wu Qi's neck. Sun Kuang frowned and pointed his finger up into the sky. A beam of golden light shot straight up into the sky, then exploded into a dazzling halo that looked like a scroll. Very soon, two green beams came shooting over. Two scholars clad in tall black crowns, white robes, and black boots landed in front of the crowd. They bowed to the sky and said, "Master, Princess Zhongli has brought her men and razed Mount Yumen to the ground, slaughtering tens of thousands of people from Yu Academy, including the current sect leader of Yu Academy, Yu Wendi. Yu Qianqian has attracted the heavenly ghost from the ghost realm with a secret talisman, and is now engaged in a great war on Mount Yumen." Wu Qi's eyebrows shot up when he heard that, and a wave of anger rushed to his head. How could Yu Qianqian send someone to impersonate Lao Ai and plot against Princess Zhongli? After a long and deep kiss, Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhongli and threw her to the back. He laughed and said, "Zixian, stay at the back obediently. Let us men handle all the fighting and killing." "Huh, Yu Qianqian, you old virgin, Wu Qi is here." All of a sudden, the heavenly ghost let out a long howl. A green beam, several hundred feet in diameter, came smashing toward Wu Qi along with countless ghostly howls. The surrounding void suddenly turned dark, as if all the light had been sucked into the heavenly ghost's body. All the light within 1,000 miles had disappeared, leaving only a tall heavenly ghost hovering in midair, its body emitting a faint green glow. An enormous and bizarre pressure pressed down on everyone's heart. Apart from Sun Kuang and Mod, who were rushing to the scene from behind, none of them could move. Clenching his teeth, Yan Qijuan squeezed out a smile and said, "Zixian, father is safe and sound. It's all thanks to Wu Qi's help this time. Otherwise, father would have been killed." Staring coldly at Mount Yu, which had been completely razed to the ground, Yan Qijuan clenched his jaws and said, "My good daughter is indeed an obedient girl. She knows how to settle the score with Yu Academy. It is the people from Yu Academy who ordered those people to assassinate father." When fighting with the heavenly ghost, one could not fight it head-on. Instead, they could only attack it and entangle it, using the advantage of numbers to slowly wear it down. Then, Wu Qi let out a long cry. With 2 immortal talismans personally crafted by Patriarch Jiang Yun in both hands, he sped towards the heavenly ghost, who was displaying his might amidst the crowd of great yen cultivators. The heavenly ghost had a mighty strength, and its body was extremely tough. Although it did not use any dharma spells or divine abilities, just a casual punch from its fleshly body could easily destroy the defensive magical treasures of great yen cultivators. Although the cultivators of Great Yen Dynasty had resorted to guerrilla tactics, they were still forced to retreat. Princess Zhang Li's attitude towards Wu Qi and Yen Qijuan was like the difference between heaven and earth. Whenever she asked Wu Qi, she would ask him if he was injured or if he had suffered any internal injuries. As for Yen Qijuan, she would just tell him that he was not dead. It gave people the impression that if Wu Qi only had one finger injured, it would be a terrible thing. As for Yen Qijuan, even if he was crippled, she would feel relieved as long as he was not dead. Upon hearing the news, Wu Qi was so anxious that he kept stamping his feet and cursing Yu Qianxian's 18 generations of ancestors at the top of his voice. With his eyes bloodshot, he soared into the sky and transformed into a dark beam, flying straight towards Mount Yumen. Wu Qi had a very good eyesight. Exercising the mystic eyes of universe, he could clearly see everything that was happening around Mount Yumen from a distance of 100 miles. He saw Princess Zhang Li holding a sword that measured several tens of miles long, slashing it forcefully onto the head of a heavenly ghost, who stood 10,000 feet tall and had a ferocious and hideous appearance. After obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, Wu Qi was no longer completely ignorant about this universe. The ghost realm was originally a part of Pangu continent. But, during a battle between countless immortals and fiends during a certain cataclysm, a very large piece of Pangu continent was shattered into pieces. The broken pieces drifted into the vast starry sky, and eventually fell into a clump of innate yin ghost energy left behind by the great Saint Pangu when he created the world. The eyes of Yen Dan and Yen Qijuan nearly popped out from their sockets. Especially Yen Qijuan, who was trembling with anger. "Do you two still have any respect for me, your father and father-in-law? Don't you think you are too bold to do that in front of so many people?" Yu Qianxian was standing right on top of the heavenly ghost's head, glancing coldly at the surroundings. Suddenly, Jing Ke transformed into a white beam and shot over, slamming onto the heavenly ghost's body with a loud clang. The dark green skin of the heavenly ghost was extremely tough. Although the white beam transformed from Jing Ke sent out a large sheet of white light, it only tore a small piece of skin about 10 feet in circumference on the heavenly ghost's lower abdomen, causing a few drops of dark and foul-smelling blood to ooze out. However, it did not really hurt the heavenly ghost's body. This innate ghost energy was the first thread of innate ghost energy. Just like all the other innate energies, it possessed an unimaginably magical power. On that fragment of Pangu continent, countless immortals and Buddhas who died tragically had awakened a few eons after their deaths. When they woke up, they had been transformed into ghosts, and their characters were influenced by the innate ghost energy, becoming sinister, treacherous, cruel, and violent. Upon hearing Wu Qi's loud laughter, Yu Qianxian's face turned even more unsightly. Subconsciously, she gave her dress that was stained with blood, then suddenly pointed her finger at Wu Qi and cried out hysterically, "Heavenly ghost, kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" The sword exploded, and Princess Zhang Li spun and left without hesitation. A 5-colored cloud was hovering under her feet, and the speed of the cloud was comparable to Wu Qi's acquired magnetic sword escape beam. Wu Qi gave Princess Zhang Li a look of astonishment, then casually threw out the sword of Greedy Wolf. Together with 14 wolf heads, each the size of a water tank, shrouded in a dark glow, they transformed into a pitch-black stream of light and thrust towards the heavenly ghost. Wu Qi cried out and told them the method he came up with on how to deal with the heavenly ghost. Sitting in the chariot off in the distance, Yen Dan gave out an order. Immediately, countless great yen cultivators changed their formation, following Wu Qi's method, and began to attack the heavenly ghost. No longer did they have a head-on clash with the heavenly ghost. All of a sudden, the surrounding heaven and earth shook violently. The void cracked open, and countless ghost flames emerged out of thin air. The heavenly ghost threw its head back and let out a furious howl. Flustered and exasperated, it leaped tens of miles high into the sky with just one leap. Looking down from the sky, it swung its 4 long claws, trying to grab onto Princess Zhonglu. When Princess Zhonglu saw Wu Qi, she burst into a joyful laughter. Nimbly dodging the claws of the heavenly ghost, she spun her body and came next to Wu Qi, hugging his arm. Hastily, she ran her hands over Wu Qi's body, then gave Wu Qi a careful look. "It's a good thing that you are not missing an arm or a leg," Princess Zhonglu said happily. "Are you hurt? Do you have any internal injuries?" Slowly, the heavenly ghost opened its mouth, within which was a blinding green light that was spinning slowly. Yu Qianqian had used a secret talisman to attract the heavenly ghost from the ghost realm. On the contrary, Jing Ku, who had transformed into a white beam of light, retracted his cultivation technique abruptly, covered his head with both hands and retreated hastily. His neck was twisted in an abnormal way. The heavy impact just now had dislocated Jing Ku's neck. Flustered and exasperated, Jing Ku cursed Yu Qianqian in a low voice, then ran back to the group of great yen cultivators behind him in a sorry state. A few tall and burly captains quickly came up to him, grabbing his head and twisting it. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.